The Tracker's Mate, Sunderverse, Mate Tracker Book 1. Written by Ingrid Seymour. Narrated by Casey Hollowell. Chapter 1. A fatal attraction is a curse. No, wait a minute. Wasn't there a movie by that title? I can't call it that. Fierce attraction? Blind attraction? Dumb attraction? Sure, why not? Let's go with that. A dumb attraction is a curse. You know the kind. Out of control, listens to no reason, makes you do stupid. Yep, it's a curse. One I don't wish on anyone. That was the kind of animal magnetism that led me to Jacob Knight. He waltzed into my life the last year of high school. Before he did, I was happy, growing up with my parents and siblings, 2 sisters and 1 brother. Then, bam! As soon as I left the safety of our little family nest, things took a turn for the worse. I thought I was ready to fly, to soar like an eagle. But it turned out I was a clumsy ostrich, destined to crash and burn. Big time. For that, I blame Jake's silver eyes, chiseled face, mouth-watering body, and slutty reputation. He was 2 years ahead of me in school. I'd always been aware of him, even in kindergarten when I should have been eating my crayons instead. In my mind, he seemed unattainable, like a supernatural celebrity in a magazine. Except during my senior year at a spring break party, he noticed me. That very day, he rocked my world and my body. I should have been mortified, almost losing my virginity after he whispered a few delicious words in my ear. But I suffered no guilt. On the contrary, I felt like a woman for the first time, wild and thoroughly fulfilled. After that, we dated for 5 months. Everyone was shocked. Jacob Knight didn't date. He seduced women, got what he wanted, and went on his merry werewolf way. But not with me. He was in love. Or so I thought. I'd been so sure that after graduation I packed my bags and moved in with him. Mom tried to tell me not to rush things, but the curse of my dumb attraction was on like blood on vampire fangs. Jake had enthralled me, and my mind and body weren't mine anymore. He had a little apartment and big plans. We were great together, and not only as a couple. We made a brilliant tracking team, and we were helping people. We even solved a big missing person case for the police just in the nick of time, finding an 8-year-old girl who'd been kidnapped by a vamp who preyed on children. I was happy. Even if using my tracking powers was a bitch, and I had to keep Jake in the dark about how my skills work for fear he would worry and decide we should stop being a team. We had a great thing going, and I wanted it to last forever. Then, 3 months after I moved in with him, I woke up to a stack of cash on the kitchen table, enough for 2 months' rent, and a note that said he was leaving me. My life imploded, and in one fell swoop I learned 2 important lessons. Never fall in love, and always look out for number 1. Thank the witch lights he's out of my life. I track people's mates for a living. Humans, vampires, werewolves, fae, you name it. I help them hook up better than Tinder can. It's not an easy job for me, but if I'm smart, I can get far. Since I opened Sunder's Mate Tracker agency, I can pay all my bills, and my clothes don't have holes. Better yet, they don't stink. True, my dry cleaner's monthly charges are higher than I ever imagined possible, but I slay it. I was slaying it that night when it all began. Genuine leather pants, Louis Vuitton ankle boots, designer jacket in metallic rose gold that played beautifully against my pink-tipped hair, and a blowout that left my locks as silky as rose petals. Add to that large brown eyes, olive skin, full lips. Hello, gorgeous. A few of the men at the party also seemed to appreciate what they saw. Too bad I didn't appreciate them back. Besides, I wasn't here for brawn, but to snatch the next client for our agency. I had to look my best, so I had splurged on the clothes. I looked like $1,000,000. Felt like $1,000,000. Here. Rosalina, my best friend and business partner, walked over and handed me a Cosmopolitan. I immediately took a sip. Thank you. She clinked her glass against mine, then savored her drink. Rosalina Lopez was 3 years older than me, and whenever possible, she procured my cocktails. I was 5 months shy of 21, and though I had a pretty good fake ID, I tried to avoid the hassle. When is the big reveal? She pointed toward the suspended curtain, which concealed a scale model of Shifting Futures, a cleverly named facility that, once built, would help wayward shifter kids straighten their ways. We were at a charity event at an exclusive venue in downtown. The model was right in the middle, surrounded by dressed-up tables set for fine dining. A podium with an enormous screen stood at the back of the room. Flowers, vines, and water features made the space feel like the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The witches and mages hired for the job had overdone it, though, because the flowery perfume had already overwhelmed my sensitive sniffer. We were here to meet our future client, Selena Morelli. This hadn't been my choice for a meeting place. Not at all. The reason? The founder of Shifting Futures, Ylfin Eriksson, was putting on the party, and we were not friends. Not since I'd dated his son, and Ylfin took it upon himself to break us up. But Selena had insisted, saying she was a busy woman who preferred to kill 2 birds with 1 stone whenever possible. In truth, she was probably hoping I would find her mate among St. Louis's rich and famous. If it only worked that way. I hadn't seen her yet, but we weren't supposed to meet her until after the reveal. I shrugged in answer to Rosalina's question. I don't know when. They should just drop the curtain already. Enough suspense. Who cares? Plenty of people care, Tony. Rosalina waved her glass to indicate the crowd. She tossed her long black hair over her shoulder and scanned the guests with her radiant green eyes. She looked gorgeous in her emerald-sheathed dress. It complemented her tawny skin to perfection and accentuated her narrow waist and childbearing hips. I suppose, I admitted begrudgingly. Shifting Futures was a great charity, even if its founder was an ass. Talking about the head-up founder. I'd spotted him out of the corner of my eye. He was approaching with one of his big money friends, both dressed in sharp tuxedos. I whirled and faced the bar behind me. I hoped he wouldn't recognize my backside. I had no interest in talking to him. I was only here to meet my client. Quit lying to yourself, Tony. My subconscious piped in. To be honest, I'd gotten the peculiar idea that I might run into Ylfin's son. Steven Erickson was the last guy I'd been able to connect with since my Dumb Attraction episode with Jake Knight. And it seemed I was craving a little male attention. It had been a while, but it didn't seem Steven was here. Maybe it was for the best. Is the gone? I whispered to Rosalina out of the corner of my mouth. She made a sound in the back of her throat to indicate the coast wasn't clear yet. I patiently sipped my cocktail. It was deliciously sweet. Oh, Rosalina hissed under her breath. What? Panic tingled across my skin. She turned and faced the bar, too. He's headed straight here. No way. Yes way. I was at the brink of fleeing, 4-inch heels and all, when a snarly voice sounded behind me. Antoinetta Sunder, what a pleasure to see you again. That was what Ylfin said, except it sounded more like, Antoinetta Sunder, how disgusting to see you again. Well, the disgust was all mine. Cursing my recognizable backside, I turned to face my nemesis, the person I despised most in the world. Well, almost. Jake held the first prize. Mr. Erickson. I stamped on a charming smile. I wish I could say the same. One of his eyebrows shot up, betraying the contempt he still felt for me. Back at you, buddy. Yulfin was a man of 45 with thick red hair and a well-kept beard. 6 foot tall and built like a bull, he was of Scandinavian descent, his werewolf line dating back centuries. He resembled his son so much that a twinge of longing stabbed my chest. Even if my crush for Stephen had died of resignation a while back, I still hated this man for viciously murdering what could have been. Yulfin hadn't liked his werewolf heir, messing around with a common tracker, so he put his foot down.
"What are you doing here?"
he asked, abandoning all pretenses.
"I don't remember inviting you."
I shrugged one shoulder and winked. It's my thing. I enjoy crashing parties, remember? Right before he stuck his nose in our business, I'd interrupted a dinner party at his mansion while searching for Stephen. I'd been a bit tipsy and Yulfin had been pissed. He pushed air through his nose like an angry dog, but said nothing. And just because it would annoy him, I cast my eyes around the room. Where is your gorgeous son anyway? I haven't seen him. Erickson's upper lip twitched. It was a slight movement, but I caught it. My question had bothered him, but not only in the way I had intended. I frowned. There seemed to be more to it. Were father and son at odds again? They had never seen eye to eye. I sighed. The world keeps turning and nothing ever changes. Yulfin leaned closer, his blue eyes sharp, flashing with a subtle light for an instant.
"Let this be the last time I see you at one of my functions. For now, make sure you behave, Miss Sunder. You know I have no compunctions about throwing troublemakers out."
Which was exactly what he'd done the night I crashed his dinner party. I landed on my left on his perfect lawn. He turned and walked away. I hope his spontaneously combusts, I mumbled, shooting death rays at his tight 45-year-old butt. Rosalina snorted. What a jerk. She cocked her head, also peering at his retreating behind. Not bad for someone more than twice our age. I hated to admit it, but she was right. I heaved a sigh. Werewolves and their genes. They were the envy of even the hottest supermodels. Women couldn't resist them, just like I couldn't resist Stephen Erickson and Jacob Knight. What was with me and werewolves? Stephen had been the rebound after Jake, my attempt at being normal. But it didn't work out as I hoped. If only I could track my own mate. I'd tried several times and got nothing. It was a real bummer. I shook my head. I should have known that coming here would open the floodgates. I'd done my best not to think of hot werewolves in the past year. Rosalina had helped me, turning my attention to better things. She was the only reason I was here today. The reason we had an up-and-coming tracking agency. She'd suggested tracking mates rather than tracking missing people. We'd gone in together on a business loan and had big dreams for ourselves. I exclaimed, gulping the rest of my cocktail. Coming here was a terrible idea. I set the glass down on the bar and scanned the crowd. Rosalina cringed apologetically. It was partly her fault we were here. Everyone who was anyone in the St. Louis area was here, which is why I'd let her convince me to come. We were trying to build our agency's reputation among this type of people, hoping to gain some exclusivity. I wanted stability more than anything else. I was never sleeping under a bridge or going hungry again. I'd had enough of that thanks to Jake. I was done with being naive. Helping others never paid off. Like my father used to say, no good deed goes unpunished. I had always thought Dad jaded, but now I understood. Yulfin climbed on the podium and tapped the microphone. The guest's animated conversation stopped immediately. He took a paper from his jacket pocket and spread it over the lectern. Someone walked behind the podium. I blinked. Wait, was that Jake? Crap! Was he here? I craned my neck, eyes roving around. The man came out on the other side, and it wasn't Jake, but one of Yulfin's bodyguards, tall and broad. Another werewolf of lithe movements and impeccable posture, but not him. Man, the floodgates must have really cracked open if I was seeing things. Yulfin Eriksson cleared his throat.
I want to thank everyone for being here. Without you and your charitable contributions, this project would not be possible. This morning, we broke ground at the location where Shifting Futures will be built. Some of you were there and witnessed the natural beauty that surrounds the area. The trees, the river that runs behind the property, the hiking trails. A lovely place.
Many in the crowd nodded their assent, raising their glasses. As much as I hated the people, he was doing a good thing, helping young, misunderstood shifters function better in our society. I knew how hard it was to be different, to be called a weirdo because you had a supernatural talent. Though we all tried to live in harmony, regular humans simply didn't get it. Yulfin lifted a hand, gesturing toward the center of the room, where the curtain hung from a suspended metal ring, forming a giant tube around the model.
Behind the curtain lies the architectural scale model for our new facility. The design was a generous donation from architect Amy Kahn.
Odd whispers went around the room. Yulfin brushed shoulders with some important people. Architect Amy Kahn did impressive work all over the United States, and I was sure it didn't come cheap.
Amy couldn't be here tonight, but she sends her regards.
Yulfin smiled.
Anyway, you're not here to listen to me prattle. So without further ado, I give you Shifting Futures.
There was a pause, and everyone seemed to hold their breath. Then the curtain dropped, and the entire room erupted in screams. A body was hanging by its neck from a metal cable, its feet a mere inch from the scale model, dripping crimson blood onto the tiny buildings. He was naked, and a word was carved on his chest in big, jagged letters. War. Chapter 2. The next morning, I was rifling through files, trying to keep last night's events out of my head, but failing. At first, I hadn't recognized the dead man's face. It must have been the shock of seeing him hanging, or the blood, the people screaming and running, and Yulfin's bodyguards whisking him out of the room. But I knew the victim. His name was Blake Foster. He was Stephen's bodyguard, a strong beta wolf the family trusted. The man had been Yulfin's employee for over 2 decades, and Stephen had cared about him. Maybe more than he cared about his father. Who could have done such a thing? And why? And what about the word on Foster's chest? War. Tensions in the city had been running high for many years. Organized crime factions operated by different groups. Humans, vampires, werewolves, fae, mages, and witches all wanted more control, more power. And wasn't that always the rub? The balance was precarious, constantly teetering at the edge of war, and someone had made a move to tip the scales. The question was, who? A name immediately came to mind. Bernadetta Fiore, the Dark Donna. She was the most powerful vamp in the city, if not the country. She owned many legitimate businesses, and the authorities had never been able to pin any wrongdoing on her. But no doubt she and her people had their hands in every shady transaction that took place in St. Louis. Same as Ulfin Eriksson. I was sure of it. The man presented a pristine front, but he was no Boy Scout. Even disregarding the fact that vampires and werewolves were natural enemies, Bernadetta Fiore and Ulfin Eriksson hated each other and constantly competed in their control of real estate, government, industry, and who knew what else. Of course, the same went for all other factions. Mages or the Fae could have killed Blake too. Maybe they'd done it to start a war between vampires and werewolves. It would be a clever move for sure. Jeez, what a cluster. I still kept wishing it had been a terrible April Fool's joke. Yesterday was April 1st, after all. But that body was very real. Gah, I shook my head. I had to stop thinking about last night. I had work to do. I checked the time on my phone. It was 8 a.m. Rosalina would be here at any moment. I continued rifling through files in one of her desk drawers. Our agency was located in The Hill, a well-known Italian-American neighborhood west of downtown St. Louis. Rosalina and I grew up in the area, and we loved having our business here. Our small office was one of many on the block, a 2-story narrow building with identical others on either side. On the corner, to our right, the office space stood vacant. To our left followed a dog groomer, an ice cream parlor, and the dry cleaners that took half my paycheck. Across the street, there was a coffee shop and a pizzeria I loved. Our first floor was a long rectangular room, which we had divided into 3 sections. The reception with Rosalina's desk, and a small sitting area, my office for private customer meetings, and a compact alcove for potion making. One wall sported exposed brick, and the other displayed cool black and white photographs from local artists, all depicting couples doing romantic things, like kissing, walking down the beach, getting married. You know, stuff to get people in a mating mood. But la pièce de résistance hung straight ahead, an illustration of a modern Cupid, a badass chick with pink hair and a crossbow, flying over clouds while aiming for the kill. I had commissioned it, and if the image showed a resemblance to me, it was merely coincidental. Upstairs, a loft area served as my home. Nothing but a bed and a small bathroom, but much better than the homeless shelters I used to haunt. The bell over the front door chimed. I swiveled the chair to find Rosalina, holding our customary cups of coffee. "Good morning, Moonshine." She set my cup on the desk and blinked down at me, purple circles under her eyes. "I couldn't sleep one drop. I'll need about 6 of these today." She saluted me with her venti cup. "Same here." I saluted back and took a sip. "What a clusterfuck, huh?" "You read my thoughts." She shook her head. "I don't want to talk about it, though. I need to cleanse my mind, get rid of all that bad juju. Can I help you find something?" She raised an eyebrow, glancing over my shoulder at the drawer I'd been abusing. "Yeah," I said apologetically. "I was trying to find Selena Morelli's file." In the chaos that ensued after the reveal, we never got a chance to meet her last night. "I moved the new clients to the other cabinet, remember?" Rosalina set her coffee and purse down and removed her long coat. Underneath, she wore a pencil black skirt and crisp white shirt with a wide collar. She looked like a bank executive or lawyer, which was an excellent front for the kind of clients we needed to attract. She had applied her makeup to perfection. She loved watching YouTube videos on the subject, and it paid off, though she looked just as gorgeous without makeup. Men always hit on her wherever she went, and she had no shortage of dates. I'd offered to find her a mate more than once, but she always refused, saying she wasn't ready for that kind of commitment. Whereas I wanted nothing more than to find a mate so I could feel something again. So I could convince myself that Jake had been a mistake, instead of the one who got away. I tapped a fist against my hard head. I remember now. Sorry. It's been a hell of a week, and last night laid the cherry on top. No worries, girl. I got ya. She sashayed toward the tall wooden cabinet and procured the file in 10 seconds flat. She was efficient. She'll be here at 9:30, I said. She called earlier to reschedule. I'll update the agenda. She batted her falsies at me, subtly asking me to vacate her space. I stood and picked up my yummy venti. Thanks for the coffee. I was about to enter my office when Rosalina snapped her fingers. Oh, I forgot to tell you, the space next door. She tipped her head towards the right wall. Someone rented it. Really? Yep. The place had been vacant for the last 6 months. When the last tenant left, a grouchy lawyer who gave us the evil eye every time he saw us, we jumped for joy. But then we started worrying the new tenant might be worse. What if the new renter didn't approve of what we did and accused us of witchcraft? Not that witchcraft was illegal if you weren't hurting anyone. But things were going too well for any kind of monkey wrench to land in the agency's machinery. Well, spill! Who is it? I demanded. I have no idea. Joey told me, but he had no details. I rolled my eyes. Great. For someone who works in a coffee shop, he certainly needs to improve his gossiping skills. Joey worked at Cupo Java across the street. I told him the same thing, Rosalina quipped. Let's hope they're nice, I shrugged. I'll check on the potion ingredients to make sure I have everything for Morelli. Let me know when she gets in. Roger that. I walked into my office reviewing the file. Selena Morelli was 33 years old, the daughter of a wealthy financier. She was a stale, a regular human with no supernatural skills, as opposed to a skew, which was what they called anyone else. She had been engaged twice, but hadn't tied the knot on either occasion, which could only mean those men hadn't been her true mates. A close friend sent her after we found the love of his life. Despite the reference, Selena was full of skepticism. But when I was done with her, she would be a believer. It was hard to argue with results. I heaved a sigh. If only I could use my powers on myself. I walked across my 10x10 office. My desk stood in the far corner, a large print of a cuddly puppy hanging above it. His eyes were soulful and put my customers in the right soft-hearted, lovesick mood. At the back of the room, I opened the narrow door to the potions alcove and entered. A sturdy work table, its surface smooth from years of use, sat against the wall. An equally ancient cupboard stood to the right. It had open shelves at the top and rows of tiny drawers at the bottom. The table and cupboard had belonged to my mother, and before that, to my Nona. I had inherited more than my skills from them. I checked the shelves. Pixie dust, 7-continent cloud mist, wind-blown mint leaves, volcanic ash. They were all there. Though soon I would have to replenish my stash of pixie dust. A series of bangs on the wall next to my cupboard startled me. Someone was hammering on the other side. I stared at the wall, hands on my hips. So, the new tenant was already here and making a racket during business hours, no less. Great. The hammering went on for about a minute, then stopped. I waited for it to begin again, but it didn't. Good. I couldn't talk to customers like that. If it started again, I would have to go next door to shove their hammer where they couldn't find it anymore. I went back to my desk and spent the rest of the hour reviewing Selena's file and making a few phone calls. Images of Foster's hanging body flashed before my eyes, unbidden. I couldn't get them out of my head, nor the foreboding that something bad would happen. Are you all right? Rosalina asked from the door. I glanced up, lifting my head from steepled fingers. Oh, I'm fine. just thinking about last night. I've been doing the same, but it's time to look sharp. Miss Morelli's here. Already? I rose from the chair, shook myself, and straightened my knee-length dress. Bring her in. You have to nail this one, Tony, she reminded me. I nodded. I will. If I found Selena Morelli's mate, it would open a world of possibilities for Rosalina and me. I couldn't fail. Chapter 3. I smiled as Selena Morelli walked into my office. She wore a tight red dress that fit her like someone had poured it over her. Her black hair was pulled into a high ponytail, and her lips matched the shade of her outfit. She was tall and slender and wore black heels that helped accentuate shapely calves that must be the courtesy of some hot private trainer. Oh, to have that kind of time and money. Maybe one day. Miss Morelli? We shook hands over my desk. Please, I've already told you to call me Selena. Sit, Selena. I indicated the chair across from mine as I sat back. She placed her small purse on my desk and took a seat, crossing her long legs prissy-like. Selena topped 6 feet with her 2-inch heels and probably looked like a freaking goddess when she strutted down the sidewalk. I tried to picture her mate. I imagined him tall, dark, and handsome. But even if he resembled a bald orangutan, once I found him, she would have no choice but to fall desperately in love with him. I got giddy just thinking about it. God, I love my job. Nothing like getting paid to hook up lonely people. I laid my hand on top of the manila folder in front of me. For the sake of time and clarity, I didn't like dancing around the issue. I always spoke to my customers as candidly as possible. I have reviewed your file and thoroughly understand your frustration with the dating scene. You've had a certain number of relationships that must have been heartbreaking. Selena inhaled sharply, lifting her chin to appear aloof. It was common among failed lovers to act as if they were above heartache. But I was good at recognizing the signs. This woman had been hurt. Deeply. I had inferred it from her file, and now I could see it on her face. I'd seen the same strained look in the mirror many times. Who said young people lacked experience? Nothing I can't manage, she said. I don't doubt it. You seem like a strong woman. This was common too, pretending one could finger plug the heart leaks while taking on the entire world. I'd done the same after Jake. I didn't tell Mom he'd left me, and when she found out, I pretended it was no big deal, even though on the inside, I was wrecked. When the rent money he had left ran out, I was too proud to go back home, so I stayed on the streets, homeless, doing odd jobs that barely paid for food. That was when I met Rosalina. She helped me pull myself back together, and with her friendship, made me realize my worth. I didn't deserve what Jake did to me, but I'd learned my lesson. I would never give my heart so freely again. So yeah, I knew all about strong facades, but Selena didn't fool me. I'm afraid, I said, that even though it may be uncomfortable, you will have to open up in order to get what we need. Your partner warned me about this. Selena seemed on the verge of rolling her eyes, though she confined her annoyance to a slow blink. Are tears really necessary? I opened my drawer, took out a vial, uncapped it, and handed it over. I'm afraid so. She took it with distaste. I despise crying. It ruins my makeup. I can turn around if you'd like. I pushed a box of tissues in her direction and started swiveling my chair toward the back wall. No need. Let's get this over with. I stopped the chair and offered her a sympathetic smile. My latest romantic debacle happened a year ago," she began. "I was deeply in love with him. We'd been dating for almost a year when he proposed. I was ecstatic. We set a date for a month later because we couldn't wait. We even moved in together." Selena's voice broke, and she stopped to swallow. Tears were already pooling in her eyes, wavering in place, and though she knew we needed to fill the vial, she fought them. "The night before the wedding," she continued, "he went to stay with a friend, so we wouldn't see each other until we got to the church." Her chin quivered. "I haven't seen him since. His friend showed up, instead, to let me know the groom wasn't coming. Apparently that morning, my ex ran into someone from his past, a fey girlfriend he hadn't seen in years. It took them an hour to reconnect and discover they were still in love." The tears finally spilled. She had forgotten about the vial, and I had to urge her to lift it to her face. She quickly placed it in the path of her tears and filled it halfway in a few seconds. "Thank you, Selena. I can tell your tears are heartfelt. They are exactly what I need." She handed the vial back, then dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I don't love him anymore," she said once she was tear-free. "Of course not. He doesn't deserve it." "It still hurts, though. The rejection." I knew about that, too. Why hadn't I been enough? I still asked myself that question when I felt. "I can't guarantee I'll find your mate," I said, "but I assure you, if I do, you'll never feel this way again, and that hurt that still lingers will completely disappear." She gave me a weak smile that informed me she didn't believe a word I was saying. She wanted to, but she'd come to make her friend happy more than anything else. "How long will it take?" she asked. I capped the vial and whirled it around, observing its contents against the light. "At least 2 weeks." Selena made a face that revealed her impatience with the whole affair. "It's not an easy process." That was an understatement, but I kept the details to myself. Few knew the toll that playing Cupid took on me. Good thing I charged for it now. After digging into her purse, Selena came up with an envelope and slid it across the desk. "Half now, half later." "Oh, no, we agreed. No payment until I find your mate." It was a risk we were willing to take for the sake of increasing the agency's reputation. Running a mate tracking agency wasn't for the faint of heart or the lean of cash. With so many swindlers out there, no one paid for tracking services up front. They wanted results first. In the beginning, we couldn't get anyone to put down a $2 deposit, so we took jobs on consignment, our contract stating that payment would come only if we found a mate. Needless to say, the first couple of months in business were We even got an eviction letter from the landlord because we couldn't make rent, and paying the business loan came first. Luckily, we struck gold by finding the mate of a stubborn neighborhood bachelor. When the news got around, everyone and their toothless troll grandma started calling, and the terms of our contract improved in our favor. There was only one problem. They still wanted our services for cheap. In Selena Morelli's case, however, we'd decided not to charge anything up front. We wanted her to have nothing but good things to say about us, no matter the outcome. If we succeeded, our client pool would change, guaranteed. People like Selena Morelli would pay more for the same service, which was exactly what we needed to do more than simply stay afloat. My skills created a bottleneck. I couldn't take on many clients because the tracking trance kicked my butt every time. Also because it didn't give an exact location, which meant a little detective work was needed afterward. "I know what we agreed," Selena said. "But please, take it. It's not much more than I've paid my therapist, and I think this one session has been more productive than the many I've had with him." "Thank you. It means a lot to Rosalina and me.
It's only fair. Thank you for rescheduling.
No problem, I smiled. It's horrible what happened last night, isn't it? Yes, I still can't get the images out of my head.
Poor Stephen. I hope they find him soon.
She stood and hung the purse from her shoulder. Wait, what do you mean?
Don't you know?
She frowned.
Stephen Erickson was kidnapped a week ago. His bodyguard's murder was a threat to his father.
Chapter 4. After Selena Morelli left, I handed the envelope with her check to my partner. What is this? Rosalina asked.
Early Christmas,
I said, though my tone sounded more like early funeral services. Holy Niñito Jesus! She stared at the check. $15,000? I thought she wasn't going to pay unless you found her a guy. I slumped on the chair across her desk. Why so gloomy? This helps you complete the down payment for your new place. No more sleeping upstairs. She pointed toward the loft. I'd been saving to buy a condo in Compton Heights. A move-in ready 2-bedroom, 1.5-bath unit with walnut-colored hardwoods, beamed ceilings, and a cute balcony. The payment helped fulfill that dream, but at the moment, I found it difficult to get excited. It's Stephen Erickson, I said. What about him? Selena just told me he's been kidnapped and his bodyguard's murder was some sort of threat. She pressed a hand to her mouth, her green eyes shooting wide open. Oh, that's awful. Are you all right? Nope, not by a fey country mile. Man, the news had stirred a nasty cauldron of feelings I thought I'd sealed shut. That must have been why Yulfing gave me a strange look when I asked where Stephen was. I paused for a moment, thinking, maybe I should talk to him. Rosalina shot to her feet. No way! You're not doing that, Tony. You're not getting mixed up in that type of stuff again. You've come a long way and you promised yourself. I know. I grabbed my head with both hands. But this is Stephen we're talking about. Yes, the same Stephen that left your ass because Daddy didn't approve of you. And if that was the only problem, sure, I would tell you go ahead, track the hell out of him. But doing that type of work almost got you killed. It was just the once. Jake and I had been tracking Emily Gardner, an 8-year-old who had been snatched by a vamp that fed on children. The blood leech tried to take me out when I showed up at his lair. Good thing I'd had a mean werewolf at my back, and the vamp only managed to lightly rake his claws along my stomach before Jake took him out. Besides, Rosalina went on, the Ericksons are a powerful family. They can find Stephen themselves. You promised yourself, she reminded me again. I inhaled sharply as I sat up straight. You're right. Something like this would derail us completely. Right? And if you ruin what we've got going on here, she moved her hands all about to indicate our office. I swear, I'm gonna get Abuela Esperanza to exorcise you, because if you go back to that it would mean the spirit of stupidity possessed you. Rosalina's grandma Esperanza had exorcised her share of demons in her prime. Her talent had been special, but since she'd married a stale, none had passed to Rosalina or her mother. Okay, sheesh. I stood, holding my hands up to fend her off. You're right. And that's exactly why you're here. To keep me from doing dumb. Right. I pointed toward my office. I'll get to work on that potion for Selena. That'll keep me distracted. Yeah, you do that. And I'll go to the bank to deposit the check. And grab us lunch from Mama's on the way back. Sound good? Perfect. Grab me some fried ravioli, will ya? That's my girl. She winked and left with a skip in her step. In the potions alcove, I gathered all the ingredients around the 2-quart slow cooker and set to work. I started with 4 ounces of distilled water, wishing the other ingredients were as easy to get. But no. Some even came from other realms, and I could only purchase them from Fae providers at a steep price. After the distilled water, I followed with carefully measured pixie dust, 7-continent cloud mist, wind-blown mint leaves, and volcanic ash. Earth, water, wind, and fire, respectively. The pixie dust wasn't the make-you-fly kind, just plain dust from their tiny bed frames and armoires. What a ripoff. As I dropped in the last ingredient, I couldn't argue that potion making was witchy. Just the reason Stales called me a witch sometimes, even though the two were as different as a chihuahua and a werewolf. Some witches could track, true, but never as well as a specialized tracker like me. I shook the dregs of pixie dust in its container. I would soon have to visit Yelgrun for more. Good thing Selena had been generous with her trust fund. The potion ingredients cost a fortune, so much that a spell protected the alcove, one my mother had cast. She was good at them. Finally, Selena's tears. I used a long glass dropper to draw them out of the vial and counted. As the 7th tear splashed in, I held my breath. I'd had several brews go bad in the past, but when the potion started shimmering crimson, releasing the scent of freshly baked chocolate chip cookies into the air, I did a little dance. The smell was always something pleasant like that. Either one of Selena's or her mate's favorite treats. My sense of smell was way above average, an unusual but welcomed skill. I could pinpoint scents with accuracy, which helped tremendously during the tracking trance. Still dancing, I covered the slow cooker and set it to low. It would have to simmer for at least 12 hours. With that done, I left the alcove and decided to call the realtor with my good news. I would have no trouble getting approved for a loan now. I had enough for a down payment for that cute condo. I was about to press send on my cell phone when the hammering next door started up again. My jaw clenched as each blow seemed to drive a nail into my temple. I waited for a minute, then 2. The hammering continued, and my eye began twitching. I had another customer after lunch, and I couldn't have this idiot start this up then. What if it had happened right before Selena shed her reluctant tears? Nope, not doing that. I marched out of my office and walked next door. I peered inside through the glass-paneled door but couldn't see anyone. Pulling on the handle, I found the door open. I let myself in. "Hello?" I called over the incessant hammering. No one responded. Of course, I mumbled under my breath. I pushed past the reception area, which looked a lot like ours, walked through the door at the back, and halted. A man wearing a tight white t-shirt and tighter blue jeans stood with his back to me, attacking the posterior sheetrock wall as if he meant to kill it, which I guessed he did since part of it already lay dead on the dusty hardwood floor. Dust clogged the air. I waved it away for a better look. The man was tall, about 6'2", with broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Sweat covered his neck, which trickled downward, causing the shirt to stick to his muscular back. And his butt was, well, I didn't think there were words to describe it. Perfect, maybe? My mouth watered as I admired it. Then his scent registered in my hypersensitive nose, stirring an avalanche of memories, and a thrill ran up my spine. Panic bursting inside my chest. That heady scent and my mouth. It had never watered at the sight of any man, no matter how hot, except, I have to get out of here. I took a step back to flee, but too late. The hammering had stopped, and he was turning to face me. Jacob Knight was back. Chapter 5. We stared at each other for a long minute without saying a word. His gaze held mine with such intensity that I couldn't have glanced away even if I'd tried. Almost 18 months ago, Jake had walked out of my life without leaving the smallest trace behind. And now, without a warning, he was back. He was more handsome than ever, broader, more rugged, his muscles honed to perfection. His light brown hair sported a different style, short on the sides and messy on top. Perfectly trimmed stubble edged his jaw, and a new crease sat between his thick eyebrows, as if he'd spent a lot of time worrying about something. And his eyes, those eyes that still haunted my dreams. They shone silver with the light of an exposed light bulb above him, drawing me in, pulling me into the darkness of his bottomless pupils. Something else that didn't escape me was his intoxicating scent, a combination of his musk, pine, and rain. God, it was heavenly. From the way my heart was pounding, it seemed his presence still had the same messed up effect it always had.
Hello, Tony,
he said. At last, his voice the same deep baritone that could melt me into a puddle when he whispered in my ear. A million possible responses went through my head. I had imagined a ton of them, played them out like rom-coms where he fell at my feet asking for forgiveness, or like heart-wrenching dramas where I gave him the finger and left him as messed up as he left me. The silence stretched. The going mute scenario never played in all my imaginings. I always thought I would have something smart or biting to say to him. But all my words had died and gone to hell. He set the hammer down on the work table and took a step closer.
It's great to see you again.
He captured his lower lip between his teeth as if he could bite the words back. What are you doing here? Those were the words that finally made it out of my mouth. At least I managed cold and unwelcoming.
I'm back in St. Louis. For good.
For good. The words unleashed a storm in my gut, and I was glad Rosalina hadn't returned with the fried ravioli. Though maybe vomiting on his work boots would have been a well-deserved welcome. For good. I fought to ignore that bit. I don't mean here in St. Louis, I said. I mean here in this particular building. Tell me you're just a handyman. He smiled crookedly and hooked a finger in the work belt that hung around his waist.
That, and also the new tenant.
No! I stomped my foot like a cross 3-year-old. Jake blinked in surprise.
Actually, I'm pretty sure it's a yes.
You can't. You can't rent this place. You have to find another one. Preferably across town, across the world, or maybe in hell. He furrowed his brow.
And why is that?
I opened and closed my mouth, but no words came out.
I like it here. It's nice.
My agency is next door, Jake. You cannot do whatever it is you're doing here. I couldn't fathom why he needed office space. Jake had never held a job in his life that I knew of. His mother had left him a sizable inheritance when she passed away.
It's a free country, Tony. I can open my PI firm wherever I want to.
What? PI firm? That distracted me for a moment. He was a private investigator? Since when? I shook my head and tried to ignore this curveball. The first pitch he'd thrown was the only thing I needed to focus on.
My PI firm,
he began. Scratch that. I don't care about it. I held both my index fingers up and pointed them at him. You can go privately investigate a troll's behind for all I care, but you cannot open your office here.
Why?
Because. Really? I knew him to be smart, so he was being dense on purpose. He pursed his lips. Those full, chiseled lips that drove me to distraction. And thought for a moment.
Okay.
Okay?
Give me a good reason, and I'll find another place.
He raised his eyebrows and waited for my answer. Again, my mouth did that thing where it opened and closed, but no words came out. What the hell? Jake continued to wait, his crooked smile growing slowly as he watched me struggle with what to say. He knew perfectly well why I didn't want him here, but I was damned if I'd give him the satisfaction. I'll give you one good reason, I said, because if you don't leave, I'll f***ing kill you. I whirled and left with the firm intention of finding a silver bullet or wolfsbane. When I stomped back into our office, Rosalina was back at her desk. "Where were you?" she asked, turning away from the computer. "I thought—" She stopped and inspected me up and down. "What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost." "No, I saw a werewolf, that's what." I clenched my fists and growled. Rosalina did a double take. "Did you only see this werewolf, or did he bite you too?" I held both my index fingers and pointed them at her, something I seemed to be doing a lot of today. It seemed it was my way of saying I was on the verge of going on a murdering spree, and they needed to get out of my way unless they had a death wish. Werewolf bites don't turn you. That's a myth. I knew Rosalina was only joking, but I was losing it. Perfectly aware that I was in no shape to talk to anyone, I marched up the steps to the loft. There, I kicked off my heels and started pacing. A double bed, a nightstand, a chair, and an armoire comprised the bulk of my furniture. "What the hell is going on?" I mumbled at the floor. In the span of 2 hours, both Stephen and Jake had reared their heads from my past. I hadn't uttered their names in months, and now they were back, in one form or another. This isn't good. Okay, if Jake didn't want to move, Rosalina and I would find a new place, and— "Tony?" Rosalina poked her head from the steps and peered up at me. I ignored her and kept pacing. "Tony, there's this really hot guy downstairs asking to see you." Oh no. I whirled and headed toward the steps. Rosalina pressed herself to the wall and let me pass. I stormed into the reception area to find Jake waiting there. He had put on a button-up shirt and tucked it into his jeans. "Get the hell out, Jake. You have no right."
I didn't mean to upset you,
he said, as calm and collected as I'd ever seen him. He had disappeared for a year and a half, then materialized out of thin air, and he was acting as if nothing had happened? Did he have amnesia? I took a deep breath, using all my strength and will to rein in my emotions. They were wild, like a Category 5 hurricane bent on destruction, so it wasn't easy. Don't give him the satisfaction, Tony. He has no hold over you. Maybe it was too late. He'd already seen what his mere presence could do to me. Still, I'd learned a thing or two since he'd left. I had changed. I took a deep breath, and as I let it out, I neatly folded my emotions like a piece of paper and tucked them away in a private corner of my heart. "I'm not upset," I said, my voice as calm as Jake's. He frowned, his silver eyes scrutinizing me, searching for the turmoil I'd locked away. But it was gone, and I'd thrown away the key.
"Look,"
he started.
"I'm back because—"
"I don't care why you're back. Like you said, it's a free country. You can move in next door if you want, and I can move out if I want." "Wait, what?" Rosalina asked from behind me. "Move out? But we love it here." I glanced back over my shoulder. "We'll talk about it later." "Okay," she said.
"You don't have to do that,"
Jake said.
"I will terminate my contract if that's what you want. It doesn't matter. That's not why I'm here. I'm here because I need your help. Because you're the only one who can find Stephen Erickson."
Chapter 6. My mind stuttered, slowly trying to process what Jake was saying. "I'm here because I need your help. because you're the only one who can find Steven Erickson. The cogwheels inside my brain had suddenly gone rusty, screeching to a halt. Jake and Steven. Steven and Jake. It didn't compute. As I tried to say something and only puffs of air came out of my mouth, I began to think I was permanently broken. As usual, Rosalina came to my rescue. So, you're Jake Knight? He glanced at my friend, reluctantly tearing his eyes away from me.
I am.
And you're trying to find Steven Erickson?
Yes.
Rosalina shook herself and blinked. How the hell do you know Steven? Here was the question I'd been wanting to ask. It snapped me back to my senses. Yeah, how the hell? I demanded.
That doesn't matter right now,
Jake said.
His life is in danger. We have to find him before it's too late. You saw what they did to his bodyguard.
Wait, how do you know that? Then I remembered. You were there. I saw you. He nodded. And I thought I was going crazy. Look, Rosalina took a step forward and stood next to me. It's very nice of you to be so determined to find Erickson. I commend you for it. But Tony isn't going to get involved in this. Jake frowned.
I'm sorry. I don't know who you are and why you're trying to speak for Tony.
His piercing eyes shifted to me.
The woman I know speaks for herself.
Yes, she does, I said. And she isn't going to get involved in any of this. That new crease between his eyebrows grew deeper.
I don't understand.
I don't do that kind of work anymore, if you haven't noticed. I gestured around the office. I run a mate tracking agency. Now it was Jake's turn to act as if the cogwheels in his brain needed grease. He narrowed his eyes, frowned deeper, cocked his head to one side, opened and closed his mouth. And after all of that, he said absolutely nothing, which gave me an odd sort of satisfaction. Things are finally looking up for me, Jake, I continued. And I don't intend to ruin what I've accomplished.
It's Steven we're talking about.
He sounded truly confused. I've no clue how you know Steven, but don't try to act as if we're all long-lost friends, because we're not. I went on a few dates with him, and then he broke up with me because Daddy Yulfin didn't approve. That was all. If he told you more than that about our relationship, it doesn't give you the right to come here acting like this.
Tony, I don't understand. You like to help people.
And you know where that got me? I paused, feeling a lump of familiar anger build in the pit of my stomach. Nowhere. When I should have been working and saving money, I had selflessly tracked people who'd gone missing, expecting nothing in return. Yeah, saving that 8-year-old from that blood leech before he managed to hurt her and returning her to her parents had felt awesome. I would never regret saving little Emily Gardner. But in the end, all I had left were 2 months' rent, an empty bank account, and deep depression.
But this is someone you know, someone you shared something with. How can you turn your back on him when it's in your power to help?
Incredulity contorted his face. Just the way you and he turned your backs on me, I said. That's how. Jake flinched but recovered quickly.
I don't recognize you.
The words hurt. I couldn't deny it. Maybe because that innocent girl who once used her talents for good was dead. Or because my half-frozen heart couldn't warm up towards Steven, a person I'd known and liked. Or because the man I'd loved most in the world seemed so disenchanted of what I'd become. What did you expect? I asked, my voice quiet. That I would be the same naive, pliable girl you left behind? He lowered his head as if searching for an answer in the floorboards. He found none. Pain takes its toll, Jake. It shapes you, and it rids you of your soft edges. I've been honed, and there's nothing soft about me anymore. He met my gaze, and what I saw in his eyes made the half of my heart that wasn't frozen twinge. I knew him well. All the creases in his face and the way they arranged themselves to convey emotion, even against his will. Pain shaped his expression. But that wasn't all. Regret and longing were also there. At last he spoke, his deep voice raw.
I understand. I'm sorry to have bothered you.
He turned and walked to the door. There, he took a deep breath as he stared at the glowing open sign affixed to the window. Deciding on the spot, he glanced over his shoulder.
I think I'll keep the office. But don't worry. I won't bother you anymore.
He left. And as the bell above him chimed, my knees unhinged and I collapsed in Rosalina's chair. Chapter 7. Up in my loft after work, I picked up the container of fish food and dropped 5 pellets into the bowl. Eat, boy. I tapped the glass. Cupid, my red and purple beta, floated at the bottom, oblivious to his dinner. Maybe he was mad because I'd forgotten to feed him last night. He's not eating, I complained, glancing back at Rosalina, who was sitting on my fuzzy papasan chair, massaging her feet. Stop projecting all your troubles on that fish. She set down one foot and started on the other. Gah, I hate breaking in new shoes. They're cute, but they're killing me. I'm not projecting. You know I need to do a good job with Cupid. I mean, to move up to a cat, I have to keep this fish alive. Rosalina rolled her eyes. Cats take care of themselves. They can probably even take care of you. I seriously doubt that. I stared at Cupid, leaning over his bowl. Finally, he floated over and gulped one of the pellets. Good boy. Feeling as if I'd ran 3 marathons and then had been hit by a train, I kicked off my shoes and collapsed on the bed. What a day, I sighed. Are you all right? Her voice took on a serious tone. I pulled the pillow over and squeezed it tight. I don't know. I feel a mess. I don't blame you. A lot just hit you. How do you feel about Jake being back? I pressed a finger to my lips, then cupped both my ears and moved my hands around like radars. Werewolves could hear through walls if they tried. Rosalina frowned. Want to get out of here? Go get some dinner? You never ate your fried ravioli. You must be hungry. It was early for dinner, but I was starving. Stress always had that effect on me. I'll have to eat something light, though. I wrinkled my nose. I have kickboxing class later. Why don't you skip? I made a face. I didn't like to skip. The exercise helped with the aforementioned stress. You deserve a break, especially with Morelli's tracking coming up. She wasn't wrong about that. Tracking always left me exhausted and banking my energy before the trance really helped. I'd never been as careful about using my powers as I was now, and I owed my prudence to Rosalina, who always had my best interest at heart. All right, let's do it, I said. I honestly think I can devour a large pizza all on my own. After I changed into jeans, we locked the office and walked arm in arm down the street, our heels clicking against the sidewalk. I even managed not to glance in the direction of Jake's office. I would have to decide what to do, whether to leave the building or stay. But I'd gotten here first. He should be the one to leave. Maybe I could sabotage him. That was a worthy thought. We chose Giovanni's Pizzeria across the street. It was a cozy place with a brick magical oven that infused their pizzas with unique secret flavors. The owner was an Italian mage with a specialty in culinary potions. The place packed a good crowd all the time. We got our favorite table. I inhaled the delicious smells, pinpointing known ingredients and wondering about some I'd never come across. When the food arrived, we ate like lions at the zoo. We fought over the cheese sticks and marinara dipping sauce. We talked about inconsequential stuff like whether Italian sausage or pepperoni pizza ranked first, and the cute outfit she wanted to buy for her abuela's birthday party in a couple of weeks. "That's my Tony," Rosalina said, as I threw back my head laughing when I learned that Abuela Esperanza planned to rap during the party. The comment sobered me up a bit. I wanted to keep talking nonsense, but we needed to discuss what had happened. It always helped me to talk to Rosalina. She was the voice of reason when my emotions got messy. Not to mention, I'd tasked her with keeping me on the right path. Without supervision, I tended to do some dumb. Seeing that I was ready to talk, she gave me a sweet smile and said, "So, what are we gonna do? Stay? Leave? Give it some time to see what Jake does?" "The last one seems to be the most reasonable," I said. "His PI business might tank." "PI business? I thought you said he was a professional bum." "I never said that." "You said he never had a job, that he was independently wealthy." She waved her hand in the air as if it was all the same. "He is. That's why the PI business seems unnecessary. Although," I paused. With my stomach full and my temper simmering at a low burn, I started thinking more carefully about Jake's career choice. "Although what?" Rosalina picked a pepperoni piece off our pizza and popped it in her mouth. My thoughts got ahead of myself as understanding dawned on me. "It's because of his brother," I blurted out. "Huh?" "I've never told you, but Jake had a brother who went missing. They never found him." She leaned closer. "Really?" I nodded. "He disappeared when Jake was 13. He was 2 years older. Neil. That was his name. It pretty much destroyed Jake's family. His father lost his mind searching for him. A few years later, he drank himself to death. Then I swear Jake's mother died of a broken heart." "That's terrible." I should have known about it since Jake and I grew up in the same circles, but it wasn't something anyone liked to talk about, so Jake had told me. I still remembered that night. He had nearly cried, and all I could do was hold him, words sticking to my throat. I'd known even then that words meant nothing against something of that magnitude. I sighed. Jake always wanted to find him, at least know what happened to him. I think not knowing was the worst. "Ah, I would die if something happened to Vania." Vania was Rosalina's sister. She was a senior in high school, just like Lucia, my youngest sister. "Anyway," I said, sadness heavy in my heart. "I guess that explains his PI calling." "And what about him and Steven? How do you think they met?" I glanced around the pizzeria as if the answer could be found in the pictures hanging on the wall. "They're both werewolves," I said lamely, as if that could guarantee a friendship when it was the complete opposite. Werewolves stuck to their own and tended to hate members of other packs. "I thought you said Jake was a lone wolf. Don't some people call him Jake Lone?" "Yes. After his parents died, he lost all connection to his pack. He retreated." Rosalina frowned. "And Yulfin Eriksson's pack is pretty tight, so why would those two suddenly start hanging out? You don't think it was because of you? Maybe they like exchanging makeout stories?" I made a strangling motion toward her neck. "Not funny." She snickered, then sobered. "Whatever the case, it's weird." Talking things out with Rosalina and filling my stomach with greasy dough set me at ease. In the end, we decided not to do anything rash. Our lease wasn't up for another couple of months anyway. We're almost out of pixie dust, I said. I think I'll go buy Yalgren's tonight. Want anything? Oh, yes! Get me some of that puck stool. Ew. How you put that stuff on your face? I just can't even. She thrust her chin in my direction. Look at the skin. Flawless. The stuff works. I shrugged. I couldn't argue with that. Her skin was flawless. Still, I wouldn't put puck poop or anyone's poop on my face. No way. I wondered if she would continue this particular beauty routine if she laid eyes on a puck while lifting his stubby tail to do his business. I snickered at the image. What? She asked. Nothing. I'd better get going. I checked the time on my phone. Yalgren closes in an hour. I'll give you a ride. Nah, I'll walk. I need the exercise since I missed class. We said goodbye in front of the restaurant, then walked our separate ways. It was close to 7, which shocked me since that meant Rosalina and I had talked for nearly 2 hours. I smiled to myself. Whenever I was with her, time just seemed to fly. Chapter 8. There were many gates to Elfheim, the Fey realm. Some were well known, but the majority weren't. Most people knew those intended for tourism and light shopping. But others, like me, had access to select entry points through which a less sanitized version of Elfheim could be observed. To gain access, I had applied for a business license. It took over 4 weeks to secure it, and it gave me access to a nearby gate located in Tower Grove Park, only a 15-minute walk from the agency. The name of the trading post was Farrowin. Walking briskly to get my heart going, I reached the park's west gatehouse, then headed for the Turkish pavilion. A large gazebo with a cupola roof painted in red and white stripes. When I arrived, I sat at one of its tables. The place was empty but for a jogger who stood at one corner, stretching, headphones stuffed into his ears. I traced an elf rune on the table's surface with my index finger, a symbol assigned just to me, and waited as my surroundings gradually changed, a new reality bubbling into existence. The jogger disappeared, as did the pavilion, and was replaced by an outdoor tavern located in a busy cobblestone market street. As soon as I materialized, a young slight fae rushed to my side, inclined his horned head, and spoke in his tilting accent. "May I serve you something, respectable lady?" He wore a rough tunic with wooden buttons and cropped brown pants with leather shoes, no more substantial than ballet flats. "No, thank you, Abin Sinal," I answered, using the phrase respectable sir in turn. His cheeks colored at the term, and his eyes flashed disappointment at my refusal. "I'll get something on my way back," I said. "I need to catch Yalgren before he closes." He beamed, his beautiful turquoise eyes sparkling, surely looking forward to a tip in human money. It was widely accepted in Elfheim's trading posts. I abandoned the tavern's table and headed down the stall-lined alley. Here, most of the available goods consisted of food: exotic fruits and vegetables, grilled meats, honey cakes, candy. My mouth watered as the different delicious scents fought for my attention. Generally, eating Fey food was a terrible idea. It could enthrall you and ruin you for any other type of food, but not here. Trading posts had laws against enchanted food, and I ate the hazelnut and rhubarb tarts all the time. They were to die for. The people behind the stalls were all Fey of different kinds. Gnomes, dryads, knockers, pox, you name it. They sported horns, hooves, tails, wings. Some were beautiful and others not so much. The customers, on the other hand, were more of a human persuasion. At least in aspect, since they included vampires, shifters, and the like. They were all skews like me, though. No stales got access to Fey posts like this one. Ignoring the food, I took a right into the next alley and entered an area with stone and mortar shops, places more permanent compared to the transient, removable stalls. One of those places was Yalgren's Wares. I bounded up the steps that led to his heavy front door and pushed it open. A wooden chime clattered above me, and Yalgren looked up from his spot behind the counter. He came from an Elfheim town called Blada, and was one of the most intimidating-looking creatures I'd ever seen. At 7 foot tall, he had a body made out of tree branches and vines. They twisted into each other, forming a massive torso, neck, arms, and legs. The same continued over his face and formed 2 horns that stuck straight out of his head. He had entirely black eyes, 2 holes for a nose, and a mouth that sometimes clanked if he spoke without care. But however intimidating he might appear, once he opened his mouth, you couldn't help but love him.
"Tony Sunder,"
Yalgren said in his melodic baritone voice.
"Your presence graces my humble shop."
"Hello, Abin Sanel. How do you fare?"
"I fare splendidly. I hope you do as well."
I shrugged. I've been better, but can't complain. Yalgren's thick, ropey fingers lay interlaced on the wooden counter, which seemed to grow from the floor planks. He had 4 fingers on each hand, and I couldn't help but count them each time I saw them.
"Trouble brews in your realm, I hear."
I frowned up at him. "Oh?"
"News reached us of the werewolf heir taken into captivity."
Wow, news had traveled fast indeed. I wondered if that meant that Faye had something to do with the kidnapping. I nodded. Yeah, it's unfortunate. I actually know him. Yalgren scratched his head, making a sound like 2 pencils tapping together.
"Truly?"
"Truly." His face creaked as he grimaced with regret.
"I am so sorry to hear this."
Well, we hadn't talked in a while, so... I let that hang, feeling awkward until I pulled a shopping list from my pocket and set it on the counter. I'm running out of a few items, including pixie dust. He took the note with incredible gentleness, which seemed at odds with his large fingers.
"I got a new batch just yesterday."
Awesome. Just the reason I loved shopping here. Always the freshest ingredients. He set about gathering my items, humming and lumbering around his high shelves. He pushed around jars, wooden boxes, dissected branches, rocks, and corked bottles full of strange liquids. I wiggled my nose as if that would get rid of the million scents that filled the shop. The chime clanked as another customer entered the shop. I glanced back and had to do a double take. Fae individuals always left me in awe, but this time I was dumbstruck. I snapped my mouth shut, my teeth clicking, and forced myself to breathe before I passed out at the sight of the male who strolled in. He was magnificent, a walking dream imagined by a skillful artist. He had a warrior's body, broad, tall, and muscled in all the right places. Long, blue-black hair fell chest-high around him, graced with narrow braids kept in place by silver beads. A pattern of intricate tattoos ran down the right side of his face, from his temple down to his neck, where it disappeared under a black embroidered tunic. Pointed ears decorated with silver cuffs stuck out through his luscious locks. And his face. Oh my God, his face. Everything about it was chiseled perfection. His straight nose, strong jaw, high cheekbones, and devastating lips. Thin eyebrows that rose at an impish angle framed a pair of serious, cobalt blue eyes. He bowed as he noticed me watching and waited by the door, large hands clasped in front of him. I had never wanted to be anything but human, but at that moment, I would have sold my unborn children to be the kind of fae this male would fall for. Geez, grow up, Tony. I shook myself and turned to Yalgren, who still perused the shelves and, at last, came up with Rosalina's pox stool, which I recognized by its black jar covered with a green cloth secured with twine. Yalgren lumbered back in my direction and noticed the newcomer. His large black eyes widened to the size of apples, and he clumsily set his load on the polished counter, jars clinking precariously against each other.
Prince Khalil,
he said with a bow. Prince Khalil? If I had my facts straight, this was the prince of the Seelie Fae, the eldest son of King Bethan Adanarin and Queen Ethne Adanarin. Holy! Did princes do their own shopping in Elfheim? Judging by Yalgren's reaction, I didn't think so.
And you must be Yalgren of Blada,
the prince said, with a quick smile and a beautiful, deep voice.
I am honored.
The shop owner bowed, his back creaking like an old door as his horns almost touched the counter. His head shifted from the prince to me, then back again. He didn't seem to know what to do. Finish filling the order of a lowly human or tend to his future king, even if he'd just shown up. I decided to make things easier for him. I can pack all of this while you see to your new customer. Yalgren seemed relieved and moved down the counter to take Prince Khalil's order. While I wrapped my jars in brown paper and stuffed them in a cloth sack, I stole a few glances at the prince's profile. He murmured to Yalgren, who quickly filled Khalil's order and got paid with several gold coins. Before I even finished packing my items, the prince walked out the door with a quick farewell. As I paid a stunned Yalgren in my lame American dollars, he took the money absent-mindedly. Prince Khalil's a hottie, huh? I said. Yalgren's brow knitted together.
Hottie?
Never mind. Thanks for this. I gestured toward the sack that now hung from my shoulder. I'll see you next month.
Well met.
Well met. I gave him a small wave and left the shop. I was walking back toward the exit point, thinking about Rosalina's reaction when I told her I'd seen Prince Khalil Adanarin, when someone rushed me from the side, forcing me inside a narrow alleyway and sending me crashing against a stack of wooden crates. Empty boxes rained all around me as I fell. A sharp corner dug into my back. I cried out in pain and tried to hold to the cloth sack, but it slipped from my hand. Heart thumping, I pushed a crate off my chest and blinked up to find a man looming over me. He was dressed all in black, wore a leather cloak, and had spiky, bright red hair. Not natural, but from cheap dye or a spell gone wrong. His eyes shone the color of a pale sky, which let me know he was an azure mage. A crackling spell erupted in his hand, and he pointed it straight at my face. My lungs froze, and a second cry got caught in my throat.
You're coming with me, little tracker,
the mage said as he pulled his hand back. The hell I am. Acting on pure instinct, I lunged forward, wrapped my arms around his ankles, and took him down. He fell on his ass, his spell shooting up into the sky. Cursing, he reloaded his hand with more magic and prepared to shoot. This time, I went for his balls and drove my fist right between his legs. He howled in pain, and his spell fizzled down to nothing, sputtering to tiny sparks as he cradled his package. I scrambled away from him, picked up my bag, and jumped to my feet. I started to run out of the alley, but Prince Khalil appeared out of nowhere and blocked my path. I shrieked and froze. The prince stood staring down at my attacker as he twisted like a wilted earthworm. With one powerful arm, he grabbed the mage by the scruff of the neck, lifted him to a kneeling position, and pressed a dagger to his throat. The mage mewled and went still. Tears rolled down his cheeks, probably in honor of his lost progeny since his were now stuck in his kidneys. The prince sneered as the mage whimpered, then, without warning, whacked him in the back of the head. The man's joints unhinged, and he went as floppy as a marionette, the light disappearing from his eyes. Prince Khalil eased him to the ground and carelessly sheathed the dagger at his waist.
Are you hurt?
he asked. Is he dead? I asked, hiccuping.
No. Do you know him?
I shook my head, surprised by Khalil's cool and calculated demeanor.
Spells are forbidden here,
the prince spat.
I have no tolerance for rule breakers. Are you hurt?
He asked again. I shook my head, staring at the designs in Khalil's tunic, avoiding his intense cobalt eyes at all costs. The prince poked the mage with one boot.
Why would this man want to hurt you?
I don't know.
Do you come here often?
Khalil's voice rang with suspicion. Oh, crap. Would he blame me for bringing trouble into his realm? About once a month, I answered, then hurried to add, maybe he was a mugger. Though he'd said, "You're coming with me, little tracker," which meant he'd known who I was. But why would anyone want to kidnap me? The prince inclined his head, his midnight blue hair swinging to one side.
Mugger?
A thief. He took my sack, quickly peered inside, then offered it back.
I doubt it, unless you have gold or lots of your paper money.
I took my humble purchases and hung the bag over my shoulder. They seemed to be intact. I don't have either. Khalil made a sound in the back of his throat.
Then you should take account of your enemies.
I didn't have any enemies. At least, that was what I'd believed just moments ago. God, I needed to get out of here, go home. My nerves were wrecked. But would Khalil let me leave? The Fae resolutely dispensed punishment to any visitor who broke their rules. Exhibit A, the unconscious mage.
What is your name, human?
He asked. I winced, imagining myself trapped in a Fae prison for the rest of my days. Tony? Tony Sunder?
I will escort you to the exit point to make sure you get back safely, Tony Sunder.
I heaved a sigh of relief. As we exited the alley, I glanced back at the mage, wondering what would happen to him. Would they send him back to our realm, or keep him here? If so, would anyone outside of Elfheim be notified?
My men will take care of him,
Khalil said as if reading my mind. He gestured toward a couple of Fae guards who wore leggings stuffed into boots and black tunics with an embroidered shield in the middle. They'd been standing at either side of the alley, and quickly rushed in and picked up the mage by the arms.
We follow procedure when these things happen,
Khalil continued.
They are part of our agreement with your kind. It will all be done according to our shared laws, I assure you. You can check with your authorities in a few days to report the attack and learn the man's identity.
I'd never been in a situation like this before, so I hadn't known of these procedures. But knowing the incident would be reported put my mind at ease somewhat. When we made it to the exit point, Khalil inclined his head and left me without a word. I thought of ordering something at the tavern to help calm my nerves, but I was too worried to linger in Elfheim. So I sat at an empty table, traced my rune on its surface, and materialized back in my realm. Chapter 9. Darkness had descended in my realm. I had been so bent on leaving Elfheim that I didn't think what would be waiting for me back here. A large park in the middle of the night. Clutching my sack, I left the pavilion and rushed back home. I walked at a clipped pace, glancing left and right, searching for would-be attackers, almost giving myself whiplash. I made it back to my street in record time, sweating like a racehorse and fresh out of breath. Relief washed over me when I spotted the sign above our door. I couldn't wait to get inside, lock the door, and hide behind the protection of Mom's spells. Before going in, I peered all around to make sure the coast was clear. The coffee shop across the street had already closed, and only the pizzeria remained open, so no people roamed the street anymore. Hands shaking, I keyed the lock, put the sack on the floor, and stepped inside. Just as I started to close the door, a man appeared out of thin air and shoved the door open again. I hit my forehead, causing me to drop the keys and lose my balance. Not again! I staggered backward, arms windmilling. Darkness enveloped me, and as the bell chimed above, he rushed me, knocking me to the floor and forcing a piece of cloth against my mouth. A sharp scent invaded my nostrils, sending lances of pain into my sinuses. Bleak kiss. I'd smelled it before, and I knew exactly what it would do to me. Pressing my lips together, I held my breath and tried to fight the panic raging through my veins. You know what to do. You know what to do. In kickboxing class, the teacher shared self-defense techniques all the time. Which one applies now? Think. My thoughts were a jumble. Nothing came to me. My lungs burned from the lack of oxygen, and my mind went blank. That was when my instincts took over. Reflexively, I curled up on my side, bringing my thighs to my stomach. Then, sneaking a knee against the man's hips, I uncurled, pushing with all my strength. The move worked as intended, extending and weakening my assailant's hold. As he struggled to get a better grip, I swung my leg, threw it over his neck, and flipped him over, ending on top. The bleak kiss-soaked cloth fell from his hand as he fought back. I bared my teeth and jammed the palm of my hand against his nose. It broke with a crunch. The man cried out, gurgling as blood filled his mouth. I jumped to my feet, rushed to Rosalina's desk, and pulled out the 9mm snub-nosed revolver I kept stashed in a drawer. I knew how to use it, and I would if it came to it. Don't move, or I'll redecorate the place with your brains. Just as I reached for my cell to dial 911, the door to the office burst open, and a tall black figure rushed in. I aimed the gun at the broad chest and nearly pulled the trigger, but stopped when I noticed the glow of silver eyes. Jake.
Tony, are you all right?
He growled, his voice a rumble of anger and wildness. I'm fine. I re-aimed the gun at my fallen attacker and pulled the phone out of my pocket. Without warning, Jake grabbed the man by the collar, hauled him upright, and slammed him against the wall.
Who the hell are you?
He demanded. The man groaned and turned away from Jake. Blood oozed from his nose, sliding down to his mouth and chin. I'd done a number on him. Just what he deserved, I hoped he would have a crooked nose for the rest of his life. 911, what's your emergency? The responder asked on the other side of the line. Someone attacked me and tried to... What exactly? Rendered me unconscious for sure, but why? To rape me? I doubted it. Considering this was the second incident tonight, there was more to this. I began again. Someone broke into my office and attacked me. He's restrained now. The responder rambled something I didn't fully grasp since I'd become distracted by Jake slamming the guy against the wall, rattling his brains.
What did you want with her?
He snarled. The man shook his head and said nothing. I couldn't fully see Jake's face, but in his profile, I noticed his ears growing pointed and fur sprouting down the back of his neck and arms. Large claws and fangs slid into place. He roared in the man's face, a savage sound that turned my insides to runny gelatin. A stain spread down the man's jeans, and the sharp scent of urine filled the air. Ma'am, what's going on there? The responder's voice broke through the receiver. Units are on their way. Hold tight and remain on the line. Jake wrapped his clawed hands around my attacker's throat.
I'll ask you one more time. And if you don't tell me what I want to know, I'll rip your throat out.
Mr. Wetpants whimpered, his knees buckling from fear as Jake crushed him against the brick wall.
What did you want with Tony Sunder?
They sent me to kidnap her, he said in a nasally tone. Kidnap? Again? What the hell was going on?
Who?
Jake roared. The man whined in the back of his throat, looking as if he would wet his pants again. Jake tightened the hold, his claws drawing blood. Jake, please, I pleaded. If he killed the man, it would be a mess, bigger than it already was, and I didn't have the guts to see someone's life cut short. Besides, a murderer in our office would not be good for business. The police would be here at any moment anyway. They could deal with him. But Jake ignored me and leaned more heavily into the smaller man.
Last chance. Answer or I swear you'll wish you'd never been born. Who sent you?
Mr. Wet Pants sighed in resignation. He knew Jake meant every word. It was... The man's voice cut off. Jake slackened his hold on Mr. Wet Pants' throat. The man tried again. It was... His voice cut off again. Jake shook him. The man tried for the third time. He opened his mouth, shaping a name, but it never came out because he gagged as if to throw up. Jake let him go and took a step back, wiping bloody hands on his jeans. Mr. Wet Pants grabbed at his throat and fell to his knees, an awful crackling sound coming from his mouth.
What the hell?
Jake glanced at me, then back at the man. I was still frozen, the phone in one hand and the gun in the other. What's happening to him? Jake shook his head as a swarm of black beetles crawled out of the man's mouth. In seconds, they covered his face, then went back in through his ears, nostrils, and eyes. I turned away in horror. The scuttling sound of the bugs went on for a moment longer. Then there was a thud, followed by silence. I glanced back. The man laid on his side, black, empty sockets where his eyes had been. Jake and I were still staring dumbfounded at the ruined shape when patrol cars screeched to a stop outside, sirens wailing and flashing in the night. Chapter 10. An hour after the attack, Jake and I entered the police department escorted by the 2 officers who drove us there. At the counter stood a dark-skinned man in shirt sleeves and loose tie, a hand smoothing his graying goatee. His sharp brown eyes traveled over a piece of paper, moving quickly. Noticing our approach, he set the page down and walked in our direction.
You all right, kid?
He held me at arm's length, scrutinizing me from head to toe.
I just heard or I would have come myself.
Detective Tom Freeman became part of my life the night Jake and I rescued the Garner girl. He had been the detective leading the case and grilled us for hours until he was satisfied with every detail. Through the ordeal, he met my dad and they struck a friendship. When Dad passed away of pancreatic cancer a year ago, he asked Tom to take care of me, an assignment he took seriously. We had coffee at least once a week. He was the one who insisted I keep a gun in the office and the one who took me to the shooting range to practice. He had also suggested kickboxing. He had kids of his own, but one lived in Los Angeles and the other in Denver. His wife had passed away from a heart attack before she turned 50, and it seemed I'd become his family's poor substitute. I loved this man to pieces. I'm fine, I said. Satisfied, he took a step back, his gaze drifting to Jake, who stood behind me. Tom's expression tightened.
And look who the cat dragged in.
The words crackled with hostility. Tom's capacity to switch from nice to mean and back again always surprised me. He could play good cop, bad cop all on his own. But even though he saw his share of bad and knew how to handle it, he didn't let it darken his soul.
Detective?
Jake greeted. Tom turned.
Follow me.
We went into his office and sat across from him, while he glared at us from behind his desk. Yes, Jake and I had helped solve the Emily Garner case, but other times we'd also stuck our noses where they didn't belong, pissing people off. Tom had gotten us out of a few binds with his superiors. Like the time I called his boss a racist twat-waffle because he hadn't bothered to look for a missing leprechaun that left Elfheim by accident and got lost in the St. Louis Galleria Mall. Excuse me, but that's a big-ass place for such a little guy. Good thing I'd found him and returned him home safely before he got too comfortable and started jumping out of toilets in the ladies' bathroom. The gates to Elfheim were highly monitored for a reason.
"The pair of you again,"
Tom said.
"As if we don't have enough problems already."
"There's no pair of us." I scooted my chair away from Jake's. "It's just Jake over there and me over here."
"It's good to see you too, Detective,"
Jake said. Always the smartass. Tom rubbed his stubble, making a sandpapery sound. Dark circles surrounded his eyes, which suggested things around the hill had him burning the midnight oil. He made a tired, come here motion with his large hand.
"All right. Tell me what happened."
Jake opened his mouth to speak, but Tom halted him with a raised index finger.
"Not you, Knight. Tony."
I gave Jake a satisfied grin. As teenagers, Jake and I had spent many hours in this very office, mostly talking ourselves out of trouble, and Tom had always picked me first to explain things. He said I made more sense and gave him fewer urges to break someone's neck. Jake huffed and murmured under his breath,
"Typical."
Without embellishments, I explained everything that happened from the moment I left Rosalina outside the pizzeria to the moment the cops showed up. Tom said when I was done,
"Not more of this supernatural crap. Beetles? The Sealy prints, really? And they never said who sent them."
Tom was a stale and hated dealing with skew cases because they messed up his closing rate. Vanilla human crimes were much easier to solve and kinder on his record. I shook my head. The first guy never had a chance, and the second, I think someone put a spell on him to make sure he didn't rat them out.
"I'm sure that's what they did."
Tom rubbed the back of his neck.
"We've seen it a lot lately. It happened to a couple of eyewitnesses."
"Eyewitnesses?" Jake asked. Tom's attention shifted to Jake.
"It's none of your concern." "It is if it has anything to do with Steven Erickson's kidnapping." Tom cocked his head to one side and steepled his fingers. "And what does that have to do with you?"
Jake reached for his wallet, pulled out a business card, and slid it across the desk.
"Everything. His father hired me to find him, but more than that, Steven's my friend."
He'd been hired by Yulfin? He never mentioned that tidbit. The detective glanced down at the card.
"A P.I. God protect us."
He considered for a moment.
"Look, I don't need you causing trouble for us, Knight. Let us do our job." "I don't want to cause any trouble for anyone. All I want is to find Steven before it's too late."
Tom smiled stiffly.
"Then we have the same goal. I hope I don't need to remind you that if you find out anything important, you should communicate to the department immediately." "That's right. You don't have to remind me."
The detective shook his head.
"I see you haven't changed one bit, which I'm afraid doesn't bode well for either of us."
Jake didn't bother to contradict him. Instead, he gave him one of his crooked signature smiles, the one that melted hearts and scorched lingerie. Tom turned fatherly eyes in my direction.
"Sorry this happened, kid. We'll see what we can find out about that mage and Beetlejuice. I'll keep you posted."
I nodded. "Thank you."
"Bernadetta Fiore sent them,"
Jake said. Tom's eyes narrowed.
"It's not wise to throw accusations without proof."
Jake huffed. Tom turned to me.
"I would assign you a police escort, but we're short-staffed. Why don't you stay with me tonight?"
"It's fine, Tom. I'll be all right." Jake watched with interest, one eyebrow raised. Tom rubbed his forehead, preoccupied.
"You shouldn't be alone." "If you want, I can—"
Jake began. "No." I glared at him, cutting short whatever he'd been about to suggest. "I can take care of myself. I'd already subdued the intruder when you showed up, remember?" I turned to Tom. "And Thanks to you, I know how to use a gun, so I'm fine. I paused, then almost asked if they had any leads on Stephen's case, but thought better of it. Is that all? Tom nodded.
For now. Wait,
Jake said as I stood.
You're not going to ask her to help us find Stephen?
Tom's deep brown eyes went from Jake to me, then back.
No, I am not. Miss Sunder has declined to aid our department in missing person cases, even in a salaried capacity.
Yep. Tom had offered me a job. I would have helped his closing rate in skew cases, but I picked the cheerier path of mate tracking. I didn't have his strength of character and probably would turn into a psycho bitch if I saw the same thing every day. Jake pushed air through his nose.
Yeah, I heard she turned selfish. She has her reasons, and I respect them.
Tom said the last few words with emphasis, hinting that Jake should respect them too. Opening a folder, Tom started perusing it, a clear indicator that he was done with us. Thank you, Tom, I said. Good luck with your case, and get some sleep.
I'll sleep when I'm dead,
he said, without looking up. Pulling my phone out of my back pocket, I walked out of Tom's office and started dialing Rosalina's number. Jake's hand on my shoulder stopped me in my tracks.
So now you call him Tom?
He said. You've been gone for a while. A lot has changed around here. I stared pointedly at his fingers on my shoulder. He let go and held up his hand apologetically, his silver gaze intent on mine. He leaned closer. I immediately pulled back, my eyes falling to his mouth of their own accord. He pinched his eyebrows and scoffed.
Don't flatter yourself, sweetheart.
Anger twisted in the pit of my stomach like a writhing snake. I wanted to slap him right then and there, but I controlled myself. As ideas went, starting a brawl around all these uniformed cops didn't exactly get the prize. I see you're still the same narcissistic ass you've always been, I shot back, still hot as hell and able to set my panties on fire with one smoldering look, too. Him. God, I hated him.
I only want to warn you.
He leaned closer again, his deep voice a mere whisper that made the tiny hairs on the back of my arms stand on end.
You have to be careful. This wasn't a random attack. I think it's related to Stephen's disappearance.
Stop trying to make everything about Stephen. I held his gaze resolutely. Even if my panties had turned to ash, I still had my pants on and could hold my own. The Hill has never been a safe place. Things like this happen.
Kidnapping, Tony?
He had a point. Hit and runs, burglary, armed robbery, spell robbery. They topped the list of what we normally dealt with. But kidnapping? That belonged in an entirely different category. Still, he wouldn't drag me into anything I didn't want to be a part of. It had taken a lot of work to build my life back up, and I wasn't going to throw it all away for a pair of smoldering clear eyes and a hot body. Not to mention other hot things. I squared my shoulders. Like I said, I know how to take care of myself, and even if I didn't, it's not your job to worry about me, is it? You quit that job a long time ago, so you need to stop pretending you care when what you're really worried about is a fat paycheck from Yulfin Erickson. His expression tightened. A muscle jumped in his jaw and his eyes smoldered in an entirely different way. Uh-oh, I'd pissed him off. Good. To my surprise, when he spoke, his tone sounded non-committal.
I don't want anything bad to happen to you, Tony.
Isn't that charitable of you? But I'll be fine. Don't worry your werewolf head about it. I turned and walked away. I thought I'd gotten rid of him, but he caught up to me outside.
I hope you're not going back to your office,
he said, trying to sound casual. I ignored him as I stood at the edge of the sidewalk and thumbed through my contacts. It was past midnight and a blanket of dark gray clouds covered the sky. I hoped it wouldn't rain. At least not until I got to Rosalina's.
Do you have somewhere to stay besides the loft?
He asked. How the hell did he know I lived in the loft? I raised my eyebrows at him. You've been spying on me, I see.
It's my job to know things,
he offered. If that's the case, then you should know where I'm headed. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have to make a phone call. I walked away and dialed Rosalina's number. Is everything all right? Was the first thing she said, her voice in a panic. Not exactly, but I'm fine, I reassured her. I need to crash with you for a few days if that's okay. Of course. What happened? I'll tell you later. Right now I need to get out of here. I'll be there in 20. I disconnected the call, then got an Uber. I couldn't get away from Jake fast enough, and I didn't like the way he stared at my driver one bit. He certainly looked like someone who thought it was his job to worry about me. Chapter 11. The next day, I woke up with a terrible headache. My head pounded, and no amount of Rosalina's strong Colombian coffee did the trick. She stood by the stove scrambling eggs and frying bacon, while I sat at her kitchen table holding my head. She lived in a small 2-bedroom, 1-bath condo in Soulard. She'd moved in only 6 months ago and loved it. In part, our partnership had made it possible. She'd had savings from before, but the agency kept us solvent. We made enough money to pay our loan, rent, cover our bills, and still have enough money to do fun stuff, which was more than most people our age could do for themselves. From what I'd learned about Rosalina during the short 16 months since I'd met her, she'd always had a good head on her shoulders. She got good grades in college while studying business administration, even as she worked odd jobs in her free time and saved as much as possible. I met her at one of those jobs. Starbucks, evening shift after classes. I'd ordered an espresso, and when the change in my pocket came short, she waved it off and said it was on the house. Not only that, but she also noticed my gaunt face and the slobbery way I ogled the pastries behind the glass display. I'd been on the streets for a month by then, but I hadn't stopped being embarrassed by charity or hunger. I bit my tongue and took the cup because of the hollow in my belly. Grateful for something warm. It was freezing outside. I sat in a corner nursing my coffee and listening to Christmas carols from the overhead speakers. At closing time, I walked out and glanced around, trying to decide which way to go. My hands itched to call Mom or Daniela, my older sister. But I hated the thought of going back with my tail between my legs, and I didn't want to hear the inevitable "I told you so." Stubbornness and pride ranked high on my list of personality traits. So instead, I set my jaw and walked toward Tower Grove Park. I'd slept there before anyway. Hey, Rosalina called, rushing out of the coffee shop, a paper bag in hand. I turned to face her. I thought you might be hungry. She offered me the bag. I stared at it with a frown. It's just an egg muffin. They're pretty good, she said with a gentle smile that, for some reason, made my heart tighten weirdly. I was broke and on the streets, and that espresso had been more than I'd expected. And now, here was food. My stomach gave a painful pang, and I couldn't refuse it, not even after hefting the bulk of my pride on top of my shoulders. Slowly, my hand reached for the paper bag. Rosalina waited, wearing the same comforting smile. Something about her sincere expression touched me in a way nothing had. Maybe because at that moment, I'd become as vulnerable as an abandoned kitten. Either way, I immediately wanted to know her, to be her friend. Thank you, I said, my voice breaking. No worries. Are you all right? She asked, her expression full of genuine concern. I nodded. A lie. I was scared, worried I'd end up in a ditch with my throat cut, another victim of the high crime rate in St. Louis. Rosalina's lips had tightened. I could tell she hadn't believed me. I live nearby. Would you like to hang out for a bit? We could watch some Netflix or something. The rest was history. Now I smiled fondly at my friend as she walked up to the table, carrying 2 plates. She handed me one and sat across from me. Eat up. You're gonna need your strength for the trance. I dug into the eggs and bacon. She cooked them just the way I liked them. The eggs underdone and the bacon crispy. Thank you, I said through a mouthful. Normally, I didn't eat a hot breakfast. The loft didn't have a kitchen, so my first meal of the day came out of a mini fridge. A yogurt or cheese stick that never did the trick. Rosalina picked up her coffee cup and held it thoughtfully. The news is disturbing this morning. Some battle between vampires and werewolves broke out in the Scourge. The Scourge was a commercial district reserved for supernatural beings. Regular laws didn't apply there, and stales and vulnerable skews entered at their discretion. She continued. A band of werewolves immolated a couple of young vamps. They held them in the open till the sun came out. I grimaced. What a horrible death. The article suggested the vamps belonged to Bernadetta Fiore's faction, and that the attack might have been in retaliation for Stephen Erickson's kidnapping. Things are getting uglier by the minute. Yes, they are. We sat in silence for a moment, then Rosalina got to business. Okay. She held a piece of bacon between her thumb and forefinger as she spoke. We need to go to the office to pick up the potion. Hopefully the trance won't take a huge toll on you this time, and we can go back later to straighten things out. Sounds good. I really needed this trance to be easy. I had to be at my best to deal with the current storm. God, I swear if I could get my hands on that bastard who attacked you, I would kill him all over again, Rosalina said. And instead of beetles, he would have fat, juicy cockroaches coming out of his hole and going back into his mouth. I burst out laughing. Maybe there's a reason you're not a witch. Who says I'm not a witch? Check out my wand. She waved her piece of bacon in front of my face. Slowly, and in her company, my headache dissipated. She could always distract me, even from attempted kidnapping. I still hadn't told her about what had happened in Elfheim, but why worry her more? An hour later, we got to the agency. She parked her car by the front door, a red Scion, or the box with wheels as I like to call it. She had bought it about 3 months ago. It wasn't new, but it was in great shape. Only 20,000 miles on the odometer, not a scratch, no collision reports, and no stench of cigarettes inside. She fell in love with it immediately, even if it looked like a cube and had the aerodynamics of an armoire. Today, Rosalina's black hair tumbled into curls onto her shoulders. Her eye makeup sparkled flawlessly and matched the subtle blue of her blouse. We walked toward the door. Yellow tape stretched across its width. I tore it off and crumpled it into a tight ball, a surge of last night's panic filling my chest. This can't be good for business, I said, as my eyes drifted next door without my permission. Rosalina placed a finger on my chin and redirected my attention to the door. Eyes on the prize, remember? I nodded and took a deep breath. Before we left her place, I'd reminded her to remind me to forget about Jake. God, you didn't say it was this bad. Rosalina's face fell as she peered through the glass-paneled door. I don't think it. I stopped when I pushed the door open and saw the mess. File cabinets open, trampled papers on the floor, Rosalina's desk ransacked, and her laptop gone. I walked in, rendered speechless by the disaster. It wasn't this bad when I left with the police, I heard myself say. Then what happened? I don't know. I pressed a hand to my forehead, trying to wrap my head around what this could mean for the agency. Would this give us a bad name? Would we lose potential clients? At the thought, my head snapped toward my office. "The potion!" I exclaimed. I clutched my purse tightly since I'd stashed the revolver inside. With 2 attempts on my person, I felt safer carrying it around. I stepped gingerly around the files on the floor and went into my office. A similar disaster welcomed me there. They'd ransacked my desk and taken my laptop, too. Rosalina mumbled as she walked in behind me. Hand trembling, I opened the door to the alcove. Had they been able to break Mom's protective spell? Please don't. Please don't. But they had. My heart sank. Everything inside was a wreck. The shelves and tiny drawers I kept clean and organized were empty, their contents strewn on the floor, all my ingredients ruined. Their distinctive scents wafted in the air, creating a messed-up potpourri that made me wince. A familiar scent rode the air, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I would have to go back to Elfheim and spend a boatload of money to replace everything. And Selena's potion? I didn't want to glance up to find it broken and spilled over my work table. "At least the potion's okay," Rosalina said before I could look. I let out a pent-up breath of relief. With the potion intact, I could still work today and keep one of our clients happy. We would have to cancel a couple of appointments until we restocked, a luxury we couldn't afford since we could only take so many customers a month. What a mess! Rosalina placed a warm hand on my shoulder. "It's fine, Tony. Don't worry. The insurance will pay for the laptops and anything else that's broken. I'll get to work on submitting a claim, and I'll call the police, try to find out what happened. The rest should be easy. I'll pick up all the files and make sure everything is there." I nodded. "You're a saint, Rosalina, thank you." "No need to thank me. We're a team." I glanced down toward the floor at the broken bottles and ruined ingredients. "All this is expensive." "We'll claim it all as a loss," Rosalina said with confidence. "Who could have done this? And why?" "I have no idea. Maybe a competitor? Maniac? I don't even want to go upstairs," I said, picturing everything wrecked on the floor, my underwear and maybe even poor Cupid, which I hadn't fed. Again. "I'll check." Rosalina ran upstairs. A short minute later, she returned. "It's undisturbed," she said with a frown. "That's odd. Not that I'm complaining. Is Cupid all right?" "Yeah, he's fine." It seemed unlikely that whoever had torn up the office looking for who knew what would leave without searching the loft. "Maybe we'll need to splurge and get that alarm system we've been talking about. Just another layer of protection besides the spells," Rosalina said. "Yep. Well," I rolled my shoulders, forcing myself to relax. "Let's make a list so we can divide and conquer." "On it. Let me find a notebook and pen." She went back to look at her desk. That was when my subconscious, which had been busy coping with the loss, came up with a name for the familiar scent I'd detected among my ruined ingredients. Jake. He had been the one in my potions alcove. But why? Was he trying to sabotage me? Ruin my tracking business so I would help him? God, I was going to kill him. Fury lighting my fuse, I whirled and headed out. Chapter 12. I burst into Jake's place with my fire, though this time from rage. He'd left the door unlocked again, though no one was here, at least not in the front room. "Jake!" I hollered as the front door swung closed behind me. "Jacob Knight!" I called again. He appeared through the back door, wearing nothing but a pair of jeans and biker boots. He was cleaning his fingers with a rag. They had something white on them that looked like caulking. A light sheen of sweat covered his broad muscles, and I swear if I hadn't been so pissed, I would have babbled like a fish. Instead, my anger redoubled. No one had a right to be this damn hot, sexy, and infuriating.
"You're here,"
he said, relief in his voice.
"Something happened."
It was you, wasn't it? Your twisted way of dragging me into this Erickson mess? He frowned and discarded the rag on the floor.
"What are you talking about?"
Our office. All our stuff. You did that? I wanted it to sound like an accusation, but it came out as a question instead.
"Wait, you think I trashed your office? You really think me capable of that?"
You've done worse, I shot back. Your scent is all over the place. A muscle jumped in Jake's stubbled jaw. After a tense moment, he scoffed, shaking his head.
"Look, this is what happened. Early this morning, before dawn, I heard noises next door. Thought you might be back, so I got dressed and went to check. By the time I got there, whoever trashed the place had left. I called the police. They came and checked it out, but..."
He lifted his hand and shrugged.
"So, no. I didn't do it."
I raked stiff fingers into my hair, a jumble of emotions crashing inside my chest like wrecking balls. Okay, maybe he hadn't trashed my office, but only one day had passed since Jacob Knight came back into my life and everything was upside down. You know, I said, both Mom and Daniela told me many times that you were no good for me, but I never listened. Jake's silver eyes darkened, and his shoulders tensed as he held my gaze. It wasn't until the day you left that I saw the truth, and now it's like I'm seeing it all over again, like a freaking deja vu. You just got here yesterday, and look how peachy things are going.
"That's not fair,"
he said in a low whisper, scarier than any outburst he might have had. He walked closer, his body lithe, his muscles flexing under golden skin. I took a step closer too. I wasn't going to let this thing between us control me. To my satisfaction, he shuddered and stopped. His gaze slid down the length of my body. He licked his lips, then clenched his jaw. A thrill of smug pride went through me. It seemed the fierce attraction he'd felt for me before lived on. The knowledge made me feel great and awful at the same time. Great because it seemed he hadn't left the past behind either. And awful because it confused me. Because it gave me new questions about his reasons for leaving me. Of course, I had to quickly remind myself that attraction and love belonged on entirely different planes. Just stay out of my way, I said. Then I won't have to blame you if anything else goes wrong. I took a step back, ready to leave.
"You're in danger, Tony. And it has nothing to do with me."
That's not what it looks like from my end.
"What happened between us is clouding your judgment and putting your life in danger,"
he said.
"If you ask me, this is what's happening. Whoever took Stephen doesn't want him found, for obvious reasons. They know you used to have a relationship with him and might decide to track him, so they're trying to make sure that doesn't happen. You're an amazing tracker and they know it."
You're the only one trying to pull me into this. I don't want to get involved, so stop giving those criminals any ideas. He ran a hand through his soft hair. Soft? What the hell, Tony? Stop thinking like this. But how could anyone blame me? I knew exactly how amazing his hair felt between my fingers. I'd touched it many times, raking my hands through it as we made love. I shuddered. Gah, this was deteriorating quickly. I had to get out of here. Turning on my heel, I headed for the door and opened it.
"You're already involved, whether you want to be or not."
Of course. He always had to have the last word. I stomped back to my office with his voice ringing in my ears. He's infuriating, I growled as I stormed in and collapsed on a chair. Rosalina was bending down, gathering papers and pulling them into a pile. She rose to her full height of 5'5". She had on flats. I could have told you that going over there would be unproductive, but... She shrugged. The most infuriating part is, I hated to admit it, that he's right. Her perfectly plucked eyebrows went up. She abandoned the papers, sat down, and gave me her full attention. This must be good if you're agreeing with him. She wiggled her fingers in a come here motion. Spill, girl. I repeated what Jake had said almost word by word. As I went, Rosalina's expression changed, gradually growing concerned. We should have realized the kidnappers would come after you, she said when I finished. I know, but I was so busy being mad at Jake that... Oh, never mind. What do you think we should do? Move to China? She suggested. This isn't good. Bernadetta Fiore and her people are ruthless, and open war between her and Yulfin Erickson doesn't bode well for anyone. If it was the Dark Donna who kidnapped Stephen. Who else? I think the constant feud between vampires and werewolves has finally reached a boiling point. Rosalina rose from the chair and began pacing the office. Tony, this is bad. She was telling me? I'd nearly been taken last night. Twice. Had Bernadetta sent Beetlejuice and Mage? I didn't know her, so she had no reason to want to hurt me. But who was I kidding? Vampires, especially powerful ones like her, had no respect for life and took whatever they wanted without asking for permission. Well, I'm not moving to China or anywhere else, I said resolutely. I can't let Jake and his world ruin my life again. As much as you hate it, you're also part of that world, Tony, she reminded me. For over a year, I'd had a glimpse at a normal life. Yes, I'd been using my skew powers to make a living, but we only accepted stale customers, with few exceptions. Their lives were easier, simple even, and I liked pretending I was one of them. Was my time of peaceful existence over? Thanks for reminding me, I huffed. So, what then? Do I buy those plane tickets to China? Or we could go to Spain. My Spanish would come in handy. Not a bad idea. I pretended to consider it. But who was I kidding? I couldn't leave St. Louis. My family and everything we'd worked so hard for was here. Maybe we just lay low until this resolves itself, she suggested, knowing full well we weren't going anywhere. We can work from my place and set up meetings with prospective customers at coffee houses or restaurants. That would also help you stay away from... She hooked her thumb toward Jake's office. Sounds like a plan. I'll get some stuff from upstairs. And I'll gather a few files. Also, I already called my sister and asked if I could borrow her spare laptop. She said no problem. Awesome. We're in business again. Let's take butts and kick names. I stood and we high-fived each other. We had both laughed at that line from one of the Avengers movies and liked to use it pretty regularly. Chapter 13. By that afternoon, I'd made Rosalina's guest bedroom mine. The clothes that I'd stuffed in a carry-on bag already hung in the closet, and Cupid's fishbowl sat on the dresser. But more importantly, Selena's crimson potion sat on the night table, waiting in a shallow bowl. I'd closed the shades, and even though the sun had reached its peak, almost no light seeped into the small, carpeted room. I'd changed into comfortable clothes, my favorite pair of pajamas, a flannel number with a heart pattern. Chewing on my bottom lip, I worried that more kidnappers might come after me. But this place was armed to the teeth with protection spells. Mom had gone to town with her best work, and on top of that, the complex boasted stale and skew security. One of the reasons Rosalina had bought the condo. She appeared at the door, still wearing her office clothes, though barefoot rather than in her flats. Ready? She asked. I gave her a decisive nod and sat at the edge of the double bed. The potion shimmered in the bowl, looking as if a constellation of stars was trapped in it. I dreaded this part. Not so much because of the trance, but because of what would happen afterward. Magic always came with a price, and the price I paid turned out to be a real pain in the ass. Rosalina gave me a reassuring smile. "I'm right here. I'll take care of you." And she certainly did. Best of all, she made sure I had company on the other end of the trance. I'd done it alone before, and a few times it had been nothing short of terrifying. Inhaling deeply, I stood and faced the bowl. Maybe this time it wouldn't be so bad. I could only hope. Slowly, I dipped my hands into the potion, up to my wrists. When I took them out, it looked as if I'd donned a pair of shiny sequined gloves. What had been a liquid now clung to me like a second skin. Holding my hands up like a freshly scrubbed-in surgeon, I climbed into bed and made myself comfortable. Rosalina walked over and, being careful not to touch my outstretched hands, pulled the covers up to my chest. She knew I liked to be warm. Plus, the covers made me feel safe, contained somehow. "Toodles," I wiggled my fingers. She smiled, a bit sadly but reassuringly. Slowly, I lowered my hands and lightly pressed stiff fingertips to my closed eyes. My lids tingled. Next, I tilted my head back and ran my fingers downward until I reached my nostrils. The scent of chocolate chip cookies assaulted me. My tongue flicked out, tasting the potion. It reminded me of the same sweet treat. Lastly, I touched my ears, involving all my senses. After a long minute, the potion disappeared, leaving my hands and face clean as if it had never been there. I blinked my eyes open and lowered my hands to my sides. As I peered up at Rosalina, she appeared like an angel from heaven, glowing warmly while tiny stars flickered all around her. Just what I liked to see before the spell took me. Of their own accord, my eyes closed, and I found myself in what looked like a kindergartner's St. Valentine's Day goodie bag. Shiny glitter floated all around me against a deep blackness. Individual pieces twinkled while silence reigned, an indication the potion had taken hold. I was so peaceful. I could drift there forever. But I had to get to work. Tracking someone with my skills required the use of my senses. I could use 4 of them, but I only ever wanted to use 1. That would have been too easy, though. I always started with my strongest, yet most disposable sense: smell. Gradually, I activated it, and my iridescent limbo filled with a host of scents that sent my memory banks into hyperdrive. The sense of smell is the best at retrieving memories and bringing back moments and places that seemed forgotten. Like how a whiff of cannoli or homemade marinara reminds me of Nona, cooking in her large kitchen, slapping my fingers out of bowls unless I meant to help. Faster than my little sister Lucia can go through boyfriends, I examined the scents waltzing into my sparkling universe. I detected many distinct ones: car exhaust, cigarette smoke, cologne, mulch, BO, grilled meat, and more. All from places one of Selena's potential mates was currently roaming. Most people believed that only one mate existed for them, and I didn't like to contradict them. It kept confusion to a minimum, and stopped skeptical clients from asking questions that would be too hard to explain. More than 7 billion people live on Earth. Thinking that only one other person can be someone's perfect match is ludicrous. True, some of them might not speak the same language, but still, they make translation apps for a reason. As quickly as possible, the longer I stayed under the trance, the longer my recovery would be. I cataloged each scent, trying to find it in my Rolodex of memories, hoping it came from a location familiar to me. hopefully somewhere in St. Louis, or at least a city I had visited. I made it a point to travel to different places to fill my catalog and increase my success rate. One smell in particular I pinpointed without trouble. It came from a hamburger joint that I liked. The problem? It was a chain. There might be thousands of them all over the country and maybe even the world, but since I recognized it, I latched onto it. Still, this clue was too broad. I had to narrow things down. Like I'd said, getting away with using only one of my senses would be too good to be true. It was time for the next, most disposable sense: hearing. But before I moved on, I focused on a strong male scent that was unique. It was the most prevalent scent from one of Selena's mates. When I felt certain I'd committed it to memory, I let my ears come out to play. Immediately, my shimmering surroundings filled with a cacophony of sounds: horns blowing, a sledgehammer, the din of voices in a crowded place, someone coughing, a lawnmower, the low bass of a rap song, a loud fart. Most of them were useless, sounds one could hear almost anywhere. I rifled through them in frustration, discarding them, shutting them down one at a time, gradually bringing down the cacophony to a bearable level. This was taking too long already. I knew I had to hurry, but the stress of it made me clumsy. I stumbled over the sounds, hesitating to send them away even when they were irrelevant. Finally, over the racket of all the remaining sounds, one caught my attention. It repeated itself over and over, which meant the potential mate, my mark, heard it often, maybe every day. Better yet, I recognized it. It came from the bells at the cathedral basilica announcing the top of the hour. Bingo. Maybe St. Louis didn't have 7 billion inhabitants, but with nearly 3 million in the metro area, the probabilities of finding mates right here didn't suck. Besides, who could be more compatible than someone living in your own backyard? Wasting no time, I snapped out of the trance and breathed a sigh of relief when I came to. Rosalina always said that watching me during a trance scared her, and that my eyelashes didn't flutter and my chest barely rose and fell. From the sound of it, I appeared dead or comatose. But I never had trouble breaking out of a trance, though sometimes I wondered, what if I got stuck in one of them? My eyes sprang open. Exhaustion weighed my every limb, making me feel as if I'd partied hard and been put away soaking wet. Rosalina sat next to me, holding my hand. She smiled when I met her gaze, and seemed relieved to find that I'd only used 2 senses. She could tell because I hadn't lost my sight, and I could still see her. Besides feeling like a wet rag, the price I paid for tracking amounted to losing the senses I used during the trance. Of course, the loss of my senses kicked my butt the worst. For every minute I stayed under, my senses went dormant for an hour. In the past, I'd been deaf, blind, anosmic, unable to smell, and hypoesthetic, numb to the touch. I'd yet to lose my sense of taste. I'd never used it during my trance. Learning what my mark ate every morning for breakfast didn't seem useful. Right away, the lack of smells hit me like it always did. Losing my most powerful sense was awful. Worse than dumpster diving and inhaling the rotten juices like crack cocaine would be. I was sure of it. The way the air just went blank, dead, deeply unnerved me and left me feeling unmoored. The silence I could handle. The peace, the solitude in the absence of all sound wasn't bad. But the lack of sense? Too weird. Rosalina signed, her hands moving as she formed the word, read. She held up her e-reader. I said yes, but didn't hear myself. She and I were studying sign language so we could communicate. It had been her idea. She also tried hard to make the periods when I was deaf as comfortable, stress-free, and restful as possible. Reading did the trick. Her head snapped up, her brows drawing together as she listened for something. "What is it?" I asked. She beat her fist on her open palm to indicate someone was knocking at the door. In one fluid motion, she jumped to her feet, her back turned and stiff. Something told me the knocking wasn't friendly. I scrambled out of bed woozily, imagining another Beetlejuice trying to tear the door down. My weak legs protested as I stood. God, they've found us. I glanced around, searching for something to use as a weapon. The bedside lamp screamed, "Pick me!" I clumsily threw its shade on the bed, unplugged it, and held the base like a bat, ready to hit whoever walked through the door right in the gonads because I was certain the intruder had a pair of them. My arms trembled like ramen noodles. Rosalina's shoulders relaxed. Huh? No Beetlejuice? She turned and glanced at the lamp and my threatening stance. She laughed and shrugged, seeming to say, "Yeah, sure, go ahead and leave him gonadless." I was confused, to say the least. Rosalina signed for me to put the lamp down, then painstakingly formed 4 letters with her fingers. J-A-K-E. I rolled my eyes. Ugh, I'm going to kill him. Why in the hell couldn't he leave us alone? Chapter 14. Tell him I'm not here, I told Rosalina. She nodded, walked out of the bedroom, and closed the door. I sat at the edge of the bed, biting my thumbnail and bouncing my knee. How in the name of a million witch lights had he found us?
It's my job to know things.
I heard his obnoxiously sexy voice inside my head. This was the worst possible time for Jake to show up. I had purposely kept the side effects of my power secret from him. At the time, I'd been afraid he would refuse to let me use them. Losing my senses was traumatic. But that wasn't the only problem. When I tracked people in trouble, I got a full blast of what they felt. Fear, desperation, despair, pain. Mate tracking was a walk in the park compared to that. Now it didn't matter if Jake found out, but my burden felt private and I didn't think he deserved to know. My heart pounded in my chest as I tried to imagine why he'd come. What was he telling Rosalina out there? Had something... The door to the bedroom slammed open and Jake stormed in, Rosalina hot on his heels, pulling on his massive biceps with no effect. His mouth was moving at 1,000 miles per hour, and I had no godly or ungodly idea what he was saying. My gaze darted from him to Rosalina, my eyes practically screaming for help. She took a step back out of Jake's line of vision and began signing. She tripped over the words in the worst possible way. And I didn't blame her, because I doubted even one of those professional TV interpreters used during press conferences would have been able to keep up with Jake's twaddle. Honestly, it had to be twaddle. No one could move their mouth that fast and make any sense. Rosalina signed something that read like, "Pink puppies have taken over the White House." I stared at her open-mouthed. What? She tried again. Finger. What was she going on about? Whatever it was, sounded dirty. Or did she want me to give Jake the finger? I'd gladly do it, but I didn't want to be out of context. It would let him know I had no clue what was going on. Jake glared at me, his frown causing that little groove between his eyebrows to appear. He seemed expectant, probably waiting for me to say something. Rosalina signed some more, but I couldn't make heads or tails out of any of it. Jake's attention snapped to Rosalina. Her hands froze in midair. She smiled awkwardly and smoothed her dress, trying to act nonchalant. Holy goblins, she would starve in Hollywood. Jake made a "what's wrong with you" face. Then he grabbed her by the arm, led her out of the room, and clicked the lock behind her. Hey, this is her place. You can't do that. I said, furious at his nerve. He whirled, his lips already moving faster than Mom's when she found out I'd been out past curfew. I backed away as if his silent words were lashes. He pressed forward, driving me against the bed, and kept ranting. I'm freaking deaf right now. I've no idea what you're saying. I wanted to yell in his face, but I couldn't. I didn't want him to know anything else about me. Once I'd given him everything. I'd opened up about my feelings, my teenage secrets and fears. And how had he treated me? No, not doing that again. Stop! I pushed him out of the way. As Jake staggered backwards, I rounded the bed and walked to the window, my back to him. The thing about not being able to hear, it allowed me to shut the world away. I squeezed my eyes shut, picturing Jake behind me, still ranting about helping him find Steven. I couldn't imagine anything else bringing him here. He'd come back from the past with a one-track mind and a bone to pick. After a long moment, a hand settled on my shoulder. I glanced at it, hoping to find delicate manicured fingers. But instead, I found Jake's large and strong ones. He made me turn, gently, which surprised me. However, the fury absent in his touch was evident in his stormy silver eyes. His lips had stopped moving, and instead formed a thin, unforgiving line. Slowly, his hand slid from my shoulder down the length of my arm, unleashing a violent shiver across my body. Then he pressed something into my hand and squeezed my fingers around it, until I crumpled what felt like a thick piece of paper. He let go and took a step back. His head shook from side to side as disappointment and incredulity washed over him. Without another word, he walked away. As the door swung open in his wake, Rosalina appeared at the threshold. Her expression told me everything I needed to know. Whatever had brought Jake here was bad, really bad. Afraid to look, I brought my hand up and unclenched my fist, releasing what turned out to be a Polaroid picture. Carefully, I smoothed it open and stared at the image in horror. My stomach convulsed, and I dropped the gruesome photograph and ran to the bathroom. With the image of a swollen, severed finger flashing before my eyes, I retched until my ribs ached. There had been a caption under the photo that read, Steven Erikson's ring finger. Chapter 15. Jake said a note arrived with the actual finger, Rosalina explained once my hearing had returned 5 hours later. It also said that if Yulfin doesn't comply with their demands, they'll deliver Steven's head next. My stomach did a flip, then filled with about 2 tons of guilt. We sat in her living room, several boxes of Chinese takeout strewn about the coffee table. Rosalina was on the sofa and I was cross-legged on the rug, a greasy plate in front of me. After puking violently, no one should eat. At least that was what seemed reasonable, though I seemed to challenge that theory every time I threw up. I'd demolished an entire order of shrimp lo mein all by myself. What are their demands? I asked, patting my belly. I didn't exactly have a chance to ask. Jake is something when he's mad. I considered for a moment, avoiding Rosalina's gaze, fearing her reaction at the direction of my thoughts. She had kept me on a straight path for over a year. Without her, I wouldn't have gathered the pieces of my life back together. Hell, I would be addicted to drugs or scattered in pieces all over the city. I started, my voice breaking. Please don't be mad at me, but... She shook her hands. I already know what you're going to say. I have to help. If I don't, Steven... Stop! Do you really think you have to convince me? I thought it would be easy to coach you from the sidelines and tell you to stay out of it, but man, it's hard. We both smiled sadly. Her change of heart didn't surprise me. This was Rosalina, the woman who picked up stray teens off the streets and invited them to watch Netflix. Yes, it's really hard. I patted her hand. She stood and stared, pacing along the coffee table. I'm not even the one with the skills to help, and I can see why you got involved in this kind of stuff before. How Jake dragged you into it. And now it's happening again. My voice sounded so resigned it scared me. It feels like giving up, doesn't it? I nodded. Like Jake's winning. That's infuriating, Rosalina growled, picked up an egg roll and bit its tip off. Yep, totally infuriating. And yet here I was, trapped by my morals and facing one single way out, tracking Steven, even if it killed me. Why, oh why did I have a Mother Teresa complex? A baby one, but still. Rosalina gave me a sad smile. She knew me well enough to figure out what I'd decided. Early tomorrow, I said. Can you drop me off by Mom's? I think I need my car. At 7 a.m. the next day, Rosalina dropped me off in front of Mom's house, the place where I'd grown up. The two-story Cape Cod had light gray siding and teal shutters. A white railing surrounded the teal-painted porch. The front door sat off to the side, flanked by hanging plants, matching teal porch steps leading straight to it. I stood on the sidewalk for a long moment, a familiar heaviness weighing my heart down. I hadn't felt this way in a while, and I hadn't missed it. Mom wouldn't like this, not at all. I stretched my back, feeling stiff. I'd missed kickboxing class again last night, and it showed. Not that I was in any shape to work out after a trance. A car came driving up the street behind me. I felt it slow down, and out of nowhere, panic hit me. I hurried away from the curb, glancing over my shoulder as a sporty convertible came to a stop. A handsome teenage boy sat at the wheel of a black BMW. He angled his shoulders in my direction, resting his tan forearm casually on the steering wheel. He smiled, checking me out without shame. "Good morning," he purred. Where did these kids get their confidence? It had to be the cars they drove. Had to be. He was handsome. I had to give him that. Large brown eyes, trendy brown hair, strong jaw, and GQ features the envy of the sexiest man alive, whoever they'd picked this year. "Good morning," I replied with a raised eyebrow. "You must be Lucia's sister." "And you are?" "Connor, her boyfriend." "I see. I'll tell her you're here." I turned and walked toward the door, sure the kid was checking out my. I resisted the urge to glance back and give him the finger. Funny how I kept calling him a kid, but I wasn't that much older. 3 years at most. The moment I stepped onto the stoop, I breathed a sigh of relief. Home was safe. It always had been. Mom kept protection spells around the entire property capable of stopping intruders, magical attacks, and horny boyfriends. I glanced back at Connor and found that indeed he was admiring my posterior. I sighed. I placed a hand on the door handle and it unlocked for me. This was also part of Mom's spell. No one who'd ever lived in the house would be kept out. Protection spells were her specialty. She could have probably made a lot of money casting them over businesses and homes, but she never cared about money, only about protecting her own. Closing the door behind me, I walked in. The smell of breakfast sausage wafted through the air. I placed my purse on the console table and took a moment to peer at the portrait that hung above it. 6 people peered down at me. My parents, brother, 2 sisters, and a younger version of me. It had been taken when I was 15, the last year we would all be together, before Leo moved out to travel the world. I'd only seen him twice since then, the first Christmas after he moved out and during Dad's funeral. Now only Lucia still lived at home, and even she would be graduating soon. Dad was a stale, but all his children were skews because of Mom. She came from a long line of witches, mages, trackers, healers, you name it. Leo, her eldest, was a skillful mage. Daniela, her second, was a witch with great healing abilities. I was a tracker, and Lucia, the youngest, also a witch with strong telekinetic powers. We all had a variety of skills that seemed to keep changing and growing with time. Nona had been a tracker too, which allowed Mom to pinpoint what I was early on. When Snitch, our dog, went missing and I found him 20 blocks away from home, his chew rope in my tiny 5-year-old hand, Mom knew. After that, she let me spend summers with Nona in upstate New York, and I trained with her. She called me her little hound and said I had more talent in my pinky than she ever did in her whole body. She taught me everything she knew and suggested I trained with others to explore the depths of my powers, which she insisted hadn't peaked yet. But that sort of training was expensive, and I was happy with what Nona had taught me. I crossed the foyer into the living room. The decor hadn't changed in years. Same tan sofa, same walnut TV cabinet, same scratched end tables, same lamps with tasseled shades, same faux Persian rug. Wishing to catch Mom and Lucia in their natural habitat, I peeked around the corner. My sister sat at the kitchen table, while Mom stood in front of the stove, her back turned. Lucia was wiggling her fingers, her eyebrows furrowed in concentration. I followed her gaze and realized she was using her magic to nick a $20 bill out of Mom's pocketbook, which rested on the island. My mouth dropped open as I watched the bill float in Lucia's direction. Really? I tried to decide what to do. Should I stop her? I never stole from Mom or Dad, no matter how desperate I got. This was wrong. But if I said something, Lucia would get mad at me, which might be counterproductive at the moment, considering the hot boyfriend outside and her need to steal money. A sign that she might be in some kind of trouble and in need of a conversation with her big sis. I decided Mum was the word. Just as Lucia was about to snatch the bill from the air, Mom suddenly whirled and pointed a spatula straight at my sister. "Gotcha!" she exclaimed, a gleeful look in her eyes. "Oh, come on," Lucia whined. "I almost had it." Mom noticed me then. "Antoinetta." She set down her spatula, turned off the stove, and ambled over to wrap me in her arms. Mom was a petite 51-year-old woman with a few extra pounds, stockpiled for the apocalypse. Her words, not mine. In her youth, she'd been 125 pounds of pure curves and sex appeal. Also her words. Now she was critical of herself, though she had no reason to be. She speed-walked circles around the neighborhood, and in my opinion, and probably the opinion of half the middle-aged men in the Hill, she looked fine in her yoga pants. "How long have you been standing there?" Mom asked with a huge smile. She looked very pretty with her hair and makeup already done, and her colorful apron that read, "I don't need a recipe, I'm Italian." We'd all inherited her golden tone and brown eyes, as opposed to Dad's paleness and blue eyes. Long enough to witness Lucia's attempt at thievery, I gave my sister a raised eyebrow. "What's up, Tony?" "Hey, Luz." She nodded and walked toward the island. She was wearing skinny jeans with holes, black Converse, and a red hoodie. Her long brown hair was loosely curled and flowing down her back, and she had those perfect, symmetrical eyebrows that made me suspect she was watching the same YouTube videos Rosalina did. "I'll get it next time, Mom." She stuffed the 20 in the pocketbook. "You'll see." "You're welcome to try," Mom said in a sing-song voice. I walked to the stove, snatched a piece of sausage from the skillet, and popped it in my mouth. "What's this all about?" I mumbled. Just a bet she and I have, Mom said. If she can take the money without me noticing, she can keep it. How's that an appropriate game? And how come you never played it with me? Mom put her hands on her hips. Hey, with only the two of us round here, we have to keep things interesting. Lucia glanced past the threshold toward the living room, frowning. Connor is late. Oops. I thunked my head with the heel of my hand. I was supposed to tell you, he's out there. Gotta go. She popped a forkful of eggs into her mouth, picked up her backpack, and pointed an adamant finger in my direction. You need to come back at a better time so we can talk. I will, I promised, and returned her hug as she leaned over and squeezed me. With a smile, Lucia turned on her heel and rushed out of the house. Do you know this Connor guy? I asked Mom when I heard the front door close. He's Leah Baressi's kid. He gets good grades, brings her home before curfew, and brings me chocolate. I think that's all I need to know. God, how things have changed. The list of things she used to require from Daniela's boyfriends, as well as mine, was way longer and meaner than that. Mom served 2 plates and set them on the table. She also poured me a cup of black tea, her favorite thing to drink in the morning. How are you, honey? Mom scanned me carefully. Are you feeling well? I guess. Any headaches? Just one the other day. Mom worried too much. Since I was little, headaches bothered me every once in a while, and she pestered me about them all the time. Mom pursed her lips, looking worried. I sipped my tea and glanced around the kitchen, noting she'd gotten a new copper adornment to go on her knick-knack shelf. She had a farm theme going, and she'd added a rooster. What brings you here this early? Mom asked with a slight frown that let me know she already suspected something was up. I came to get the car. I'll need it for a few days. The car was a convertible 1970 Camaro Z28 in light blue with 2 black stripes running down the hood. It had belonged to Dad, and was now mine. I kept it here, stored in Mom's garage, since I didn't need to drive anywhere most of the time. I lived, ate, satisfied my salted caramel ice cream cravings, and got my clothes dry cleaned, all on the same street. In the end, it was cheaper to Uber when I needed a ride. How come? Mom narrowed her mascaraed eyes. I shrugged one shoulder and shoveled sausage into my mouth until I felt like a squirrel getting ready for winter. I had never been able to lie to Mom. I thought getting older would help, but the woman's eyes were like squishy lie detectors. She waved her fork around. Are you done? I swallowed thickly and plastered on a smile. Good sausage, Mom. Same sausage you've been eating for 20 years. From De Gregorio's. Now, spit it out. I wrinkled my nose. That would just be gross. Mom gave a tired sigh and patiently waited for me to break down and spill every single bean. I pondered how to start. The piecemeal method or the ripped off the Band-Aid one? After a moment's thought, I decided the former had no real benefits. The chew-out would be the same either way. Besides, she would eventually find out. She always did. Gossip spread through the hill like a tsunami. I need the car because I'm staying with Rosalina, and I gotta go to the police station to talk to Tom to tell him I'm gonna help him track Steven Erickson. No doubt she'd read the papers and knew of the kidnapping and the brewing war. So I didn't elaborate. And cleverly, I left out all mention of Jake. Mom did a slow blink as she processed what I'd just said. As the full meaning of my words hit, her face went red. I winced, waiting for it. A rant, a scolding, an "Are you out of your mind?" But all I got was a before she resumed pushing pieces of egg around the plate. Odd. I sipped my tea and watched her over the rim of my cup. I waited. Still nothing. I should have considered myself lucky and left it at that, but I was a glutton for punishment. No disapproving words? Oh, there are plenty of them spinning round in my head, she admitted. But she picked up both our plates and took them to the sink. But I think you know what they are. She scraped the leftovers into the garbage disposal, then pulled the Camaro's keys out of the junk drawer. Here you go. She deposited them in my hand. I frowned at the Gateway Arch keychain. Dad had gotten it during our first and only visit to the monument. He had let me pick it and said,
For our car.
I was the only one ever interested in helping him work on it after he got it. Leo had already left home, and Daniela and Lucia didn't care about getting their hands greasy or spending hours polishing metal to a perfect shine. More than anything, I'd loved spending time with Dad. Mom laid a hand on my shoulder. I glanced up. In the past year, she said, you've surprised me with your decisions and everything you've done to pull yourself out of a dark place. You're a big girl now, Antoinetta, and big girls make their own decisions. Oh, well, that was nice. It sounded like Mom finally trusted me. Should I tell her about Jacob Knight's involvement? Nah, that would just undo a very nice moment. Mom smiled. I'd like you to come for lunch one day this week. I'll cook you creamy tortellini. Yum, my favorite. Just take care, Mom added, and don't get tangled up with Jake Knight again, okay? I drove the Camaro with the top down, enjoying the way the engine roared and the wind blew in my hair. When I approached the police department, I prolonged the inevitable and took a few laps around the block, enjoying myself a little more. Finally, I parked in a spillover lot and crossed the street, almost turning tail a couple of times, though the image of that severed finger quickly set me back on track. I was glad I could work on this with Tom. He would have my back and wouldn't try to take advantage of me. I wouldn't want to work with anyone else in the police department. Too many crooked cops. A small white van sat in front of the door, a logo that read, Vinnie's Donuts stamped on the side. A woman was digging in the back, stacking several boxes on top of each other. Despite my nice breakfast at Mom's, a donut sounded pretty good. Preferably a chocolate sprinkle one. Maybe Tom would give me one. To my dismay, when I walked in, the first person I saw was Jake Knight. He was talking to a uniformed policewoman and noticed me before I had a chance to scurry back outside. Immediately, he apologized to the officer and marched in my direction. I wished I knew what he drove so I could avoid him. The woman with the donuts walked past me, headed for the front desk. She deposited her load on a far corner of the counter and walked back out at a clipped pace. She gave me a dirty look when she noticed me watching her. Disgruntled much? She probably hated donuts and any donut-vores that gave her dreamy eyes as if she were some sort of candy fairy.
What are you doing here?
Jake asked sarcastically.
Come to ask about your break-in?
None of your business, I answered like a 12-year-old, but hey, he'd started it. He was wearing an aviator jacket with a plain white t-shirt inside. His jeans were well worn and molded to his muscular thighs like soft butter molds to toast. Hot. A couple of female officers walked by and blatantly checked out his derriere, reminding me of high school all over again.
Yeah, guess it isn't any of my business,
he said. Just as he started to leave, Detective Tom Freeman walked out of his office and waved. I gave him a smile. Jake glanced back over his shoulder and glared at the detective. Then, the donuts exploded. Chapter 16. The world rumbled and I flew off my feet and slammed against the wall behind me. The back of my head hit with a thunk, and stars exploded in my vision. I collapsed to the floor like a puppet. Something heavy fell on top of me. Heat enveloped me, making me feel as if my skin would peel off and melt away into a puddle. My ears rang. Cries of pain filled the air. I shifted, sending a stab of agony down my spine. I pushed at whatever was on top of me. A person. Jake. I could tell by his unmistakable scent. I touched something wet and thick. I struggled to open my eyes against the heat. I barely managed. Jake was unconscious. Everything around us was destruction. A twisted chair lay on top of Jake. I pushed it off with some effort. It rolled out of the way with a clink. Above us, ceiling tiles hung loose, exposing thick pipes and short-circuiting cables torn by the explosion. Light flickered. Someone lay on their stomach a few feet away. The policewoman who'd been talking to Jake. Her clothes were scorched, and a ragged hole oozed blood on her side. I clenched my eyes shut and pushed Jake off me, halfway wiggling from under his heavy frame. The back of my head and spine screamed in pain, but as I assessed myself, I found no other injuries. Jake, on the other hand. My stomach did a flip at the sight of his back. I pressed a hand to my mouth. His aviator jacket and t-shirt were riddled with holes, and so was his back. It looked as if he'd been hit with a shotgun. There was a bigger wound in his right hamstring. Blood dribbled from it, rapidly staining his jeans crimson. God, he had taken the brunt of the explosion, which had saved my life. With his werewolf powers, he would heal, but not if he didn't get medical attention. Now. I glanced around at all the chaos, the bodies. A numb stupor threatened to take hold of me. I tore my eyes away from the destruction and forced myself to focus on Jake. Hey, I caressed the side of his face. Jake, wake up. My throat felt raw. I winced as the heat that blazed by the front desk flared up, igniting the ceiling. Jake! I shook him. He moaned and blinked his eyes open. Oh, thank God. We have to get out of here. Come on, help me. I rolled him over onto his back. He gritted his teeth in pain and growled. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I repeated nonsensically. Hooking my hands under his armpits, I tried pulling him to a sitting position, but he was too heavy. His boots slipped on a fallen ceiling tile as he attempted to help me. I tried even harder, leaning into him, my cheek pressed to his. Come on, you can get up, I whispered in his ear. You can do it. He bent his knees and pushed up. I pushed too, helping him to get close to the wall for support. Freeman, Jake rasped. I know. My heart twisted, hoping against all hope that Tom was all right. First, let's get you out of here. I coughed and closed my eyes against the acrid smoke. We started walking, Jake's arm across my shoulders. My back throbbed with the added weight. The fire behind us flared higher. I felt it on my back like a giant rake trying to strip me down to the bone. The smell of burning hair pierced through my senses. The exit sign glowed on the wall along with a flashing emergency light. Charred furniture blocked the door, which seemed miles away. We would never make it. Jake lost his footing and we staggered forward and fell. Crawl, I said, but I knew it was useless. He could barely move. He gave me a push. Get out of here, Tony. No, I won't leave you. The ceiling tiles above us crackled as they burned. My eyelids fluttered, then closed. My chest moved shallowly. I rested my head on the floor and coughed weakly. This was it. Crap. I hadn't even started helping, and it had all gone to already. No good deed goes unpunished, not even ones that hadn't begun yet. The front door burst open. Flames whooshed towards it. Jake and I huddled close together as they licked the air above us. I covered my face with both hands. My exposed skin sizzled, and I moaned in pain. Firefighters rushed in, pulling at a hose and spraying water. 2 men wearing masks rushed in and pulled us out, our feet dragging behind us. I was out first, then Jake. Others came to help. They grabbed our feet, lifted us off the ground, and deposited us across the street on a patch of grass. Paramedics rushed to us, pressed oxygen masks to our faces. Healers moved their hands over our bodies, and the pain subsided a little. I lifted a hand towards the burning building. "The others," I mumbled behind the mask. "We'll help them, honey," the paramedic said. "You did good. You did good. Now just breathe." As if I'd just woken up from a tracking trance, everything before me turned dark, and I couldn't hear or see anything anymore. Chapter 17. I wanted to know who the hell had taken my clothes off and left me in a hospital gown with a huge slit down my... Really? Wasn't it enough to have burned half to death, but they also had to strip me of my dignity and undies in the process? At least my phone and car keys had survived and sat on the night table. Standing next to a tall bed with railings, I fumbled with the strings behind my back, trying to tie them in a way that would cover both butt cheeks. I needed to get out of this sterile room and find Jake and Tom and all those officers who had been busy at work. The woman Jake had been talking to. My hands trembled. I couldn't tie a simple knot. I growled in frustration and stared at my fingers. They looked different, covered in newly healed skin. I'd been lucky, the healer doctor had said. She'd had to give me morphine for the pain, while she worked on me for over an hour, restoring the skin on my forearms and hands. But the injuries had been superficial enough to only need an outpatient procedure. My back felt strange too, same as my fingers, but the pain was gone. I could still smell burning hair all around me. I would need a haircut for sure. Lucky, she'd said, which made me wonder, what did that mean for the others? Determined to get some questions answered, I reached toward my back again, fumbling for the strings. I'd finally grabbed hold of them when the door to my room swung open. Jake stood at the threshold. His silver eyes held mine for a long moment. Then he let out a pent-up breath and walked in. He wore a gown just like mine and stood barefoot. He had been worse off than me, but he seemed fully healed too. Oh, the benefits of being a werewolf. I envied him that. He closed the door behind him and approached. Without a word, he came around and tied the strings at my back. He was probably getting a full view of my backside, but I didn't care. Not at the moment. When he finished and walked back around, I said, "You all right?" He made a sound in the back of his throat and nodded once. "Freeman?" He shook his head.
I don't know. I came to check on you first. Let's go find out.
Jake and I walked out of my room and headed toward the nurse's station, our bare feet slapping on the linoleum floor. One of the nurses glanced up from her computer and frowned at us. "What are you doing out of bed?"
Werewolf.
Jake pointed at his chest as a way of explanation. The nurse raised her eyebrows and nodded as if saying, "Okay, fine," then glanced at me.
"And what about you?"
"We need to know where Tom Freeman is. Is he on this floor?" I glanced down the long corridor as if I expected an arrow to appear in midair, pointing us toward the detective's room. The nurse frowned at us.
Is he a relative of yours? Listen,
Jake said, leaning over the counter and staring her down.
We were in that explosion with him. I think that gives us the right to ask how he is.
It really didn't, but it kind of made sense. The nurse thought so too because she sighed and tapped a few keys into her computer. Tom Freeman, she read. He's in the intensive care unit on the 2nd floor. Doctors and healers are working on him. He's rescheduled for a second surgery tomorrow. She glanced up. His injuries must have been substantial. Will he recover? My voice quivered. You'll have to talk directly to his doctors and healers to find out more.
What about the other people in the station?
Jake asked. The nurse sighed. Names? Jake shrugged. She gave us an unapologetic headshake. I'm sorry. I wouldn't know. We thanked her and walked back to my room. I sat on the bed feeling confused and unsure of what to do next. Jake remained by the door, a hand on the handle. I blinked at him, vaguely wondering why he was just standing there, looking uncomfortable. And I didn't think it was just the unflattering gown. At last, he blurted out,
Thank you.
I cocked my head, frowning, and, of all things, wondering if he was wearing anything under the gown.
You know, for helping me back at the station.
I shook my head and struggled to focus on what he'd just said. Then the penny dropped. You don't have to thank me.
I think I do.
No, you don't. I would have done that for anyone, even a stranger.
Oh.
He lowered his gaze and started backing out of the room. Jake, I didn't mean it like that.
It's fine. It doesn't matter. Look, I hope you feel better soon. I can tell you're still...
He waved a hand around his head as if suggesting I wasn't all there at the moment.
Anyway, I'll see you around.
Are you leaving? He nodded.
There isn't much time left for Stephen. That explosion. I'm sure it was Fiore and her people. They want to delay the police effort, throw them for a loop. The detectives were closing in on them. Now they'll be occupied with this mess. I have to find him before it's too late.
He turned to go, the gown fluttering around his muscular calves. Wait! He glanced over his shoulder, a muscle jumping in his jaw, his eyes all pupil, dark like onyx. I didn't go to the station to ask about the break-in. I paused to let that sink in. When it did, one of his thick eyebrows rose.
I see.
His mouth stretched in a smile that made me feel tingly all over. His demeanor, which had been stiff and guarded, relaxed a bit, giving me a flashback to the tenderness I knew him capable of. He extended a hand in my direction, palm up.
Come with me,
he said, his timbre soft and hopeful. Like this? I gestured towards my hospital gown, then his. He shrugged as if he didn't have a care in the world, and why should he? The moment he got outside, he could shift, and thick, beautiful gray fur would cover him. Though not if I went with him, I supposed. I returned his shrug, grabbed my phone and keys, and took his hand. His fingers tightened around mine. They were warm in my freezing hand and felt delicious. His temperature ran a little high all the time, a werewolf thing. It immediately reminded me of the many nights I'd spent in the heat of his arms. God, was this a mistake? Would he ruin my life again? For an instant, the urge to pull back came over me. I could wait to talk to Tom. He would get better soon, wouldn't he? Or maybe I could talk to someone else at the police department who would hire me for the job and provide the protection I needed. But who could I trust? Tom was the only one I knew. Besides, the time wasted trying to find someone else could make the difference between getting Stephen back in one piece and never seeing him again. There was no time. So, when Jake gently tugged on my hand, I went with him, and we padded down the hall, our asses hanging out in the air. Chapter 18. From the hospital, Jake and I Ubered to the police station. Yellow tape surrounded the entire building, and there were no signs of activity. Only a handful of hours ago, it must have been a madhouse of firefighters, detectives, bomb squad personnel, reporters, and gawkers. Now, with twilight falling quickly, the place felt like a spook house. A few cars remained in the spillover parking lot, including my Camaro. I breathed a sigh of relief at the sight of it. "Where's your ride?" I asked Jake, glancing around.
Around the corner, but I have to get a spare key. I don't know what happened to mine. I'll get it later.
From there, I drove to Jake's office, where he changed into jeans, a Y-neck shirt, a black moto jacket, and biker boots with buckles on the sides, and a heel that added an inch to his height. Not that he needed it. He also picked up a duffel bag with a change of clothes and some necessities. Apparently, like me, he'd made the place his home, and we were neighbors in more ways than one. Afterward, we drove to Rosalina's. I called her on the way there to tell her to expect visitors and quickly explained what had happened. 20 minutes later, we sat in her living room. I'd changed into comfortable jeans and tank top, glad to be rid of the stupid buttless gown. I sat cross-legged on the love seat, and Jake occupied the large sofa across from me, while Rosalina sat to the side in an armchair, her large green eyes going back and forth between us. She still seemed in shock at the events and at the fact that Jacob Knight was in her condo and not even yelling at anyone. Not something either one of us could have foreseen. After rescuing me from the streets, Rosalina also rescued me from the hole Jake left in my life. I'd lost count of how many nights I'd spent sobbing and cursing Jake's name while she comforted me, and came up with creative insults to make me laugh. Cunning canine, bloody, lousy lycanthrope. She loved alliteration. "Tony, I understand you're in pain," she'd said once. "You love him, and there's nothing wrong with that. All our lives they teach us to give, to nurture, to put ourselves last. But I'm telling you that this notion is all wrong. I'm not saying you shouldn't love, just that you should love yourself a little bit more. Men can be real." "Jake isn't like that," I blubbered. "Still, he left you without an explanation, and now look at you. You're falling apart. But you still have a life to live. For yourself, whether or not he's here. And you have to choose to live better than this, because you'd better believe he's out there having fun and not bawling his eyes out to a friend." At the time, I had wanted to believe that he missed me as much as I did. But why would he inflict that kind of pain on himself when he could have come back and told me he loved me, and I would have welcomed him with open arms as if he'd never left? It took a couple of weeks, but Rosalina's advice finally started to make sense. I'd felt less than whole without Jake, but I finally learned that I wasn't. I was still 100% Antoinetta Luna Sunder. With or without Jake, I had a life to live, and it could be a good one. Then time showed me that, indeed, it was. I still had a heck of a lot to live for, even if I didn't think another man could ever measure up to Jake. Even if I suspected he'd broken my heart for good, and it would never function properly again. Hell, it hadn't functioned properly with Stephen. I had liked him, but without passion. And now, here he was, sitting in front of me, looking hotter than he ever had, and resurrecting all kinds of memories from the mental attic where I'd stuffed them. God, this is a terrible idea. Maybe if I didn't look at him. My eyes flicked to Rosalina as I figuratively strapped on my big girl panties and reminded myself that for a year, I'd been happy because I'd taken care of the person who mattered most in the world. Tony. Rosalina smiled at me. All in all, she was handling this well, though the slight pinch of her eyebrows didn't escape my notice. Behind her nonchalant exterior, she was judging. Hard. I cleared my throat and met Jake's gaze. "Okay, so I will help you, but first, I want to understand why Yulfin won't give the kidnappers what they want. If he can bring his son home and he's just being an about it, I'm not going to risk my life.
Yulfin can't give them what they want because their demands are ridiculous. They aren't made in good faith.
Why not?
They want his pack to leave St. Louis.
What? That is ridiculous. Werewolves and their packs were territorial as hell. If Erickson and his people left their homes, which was as likely as the Fae leaving Elfheim, they would find conflict everywhere they went. Other packs would chase them away the moment they tried to settle in their territory. Not to mention that, as an alpha, Yulfin's job was to protect his pack, above everything else, even his family. Besides, who gave Bernadetta the right to try to kick anyone out of their homes? The nerve! Okay, I'll play, I said. But you have to promise that after this, you'll leave me alone. Jake's eyes narrowed. He wasn't a promise kind of guy. In fact, he hated promises. He'd told me so repeatedly in the past, and I'd never been able to extract a vow from him, no matter how small. He hesitated for a long moment, but at last, he inclined his head solemnly.
I promise.
Good. I swallowed thickly, a funny feeling in the pit of my stomach. Was this promise what I really wanted from him? God, I'd thought I'd gotten over this man, but maybe I was just full of crap. I pushed those thoughts aside and got to business. Now, first things first, I said. I'll need something of Stephen's. You know how it works. When I needed to find a known mark and had an item that belonged to them, I didn't need to brew a potion, which would save time. An excellent prospect, since the sooner I could finish this, the sooner I could get back to normal. Jake sighed in frustration.
I've been trying to get my hands on such an item since I got back into town, but I haven't been able to.
I frowned. Wait, I thought you two were close friends.
Yes, but his place burned to the ground and his office was ransacked like yours. They took every personal item that could be used for tracking, so I got nothing.
Then we need to talk to his father, I said. Yulfin must have something of his son. Or a girlfriend. How about a girlfriend?
Stephen wasn't seeing anyone, and Yulfin, he's not cooperating.
What do you mean? I thought he hired you.
I lied. Actually, he blames me for some of Stephen's behavior. He warned me not to bother him again unless I want his pack to tear me to pieces.
Rosalina left her chair and slowly walked backward into the kitchen. Every few seconds, she stuck her head out to listen, then finally came back with a bag of microwave popcorn. She retook her seat, opened the popcorn, and started eating as if she were at the movie theater. Jake and I gave her a sideways glance, then refocused. What behavior? I asked, then shook my hands in front of me. Never mind, I don't need to know about that. All I need is for you to bring me something that belongs to Stephen so I can get to work.
Haven't you been listening? I told you I don't have anything.
I flipped my hands palms up and gave him an annoyed glare. Then how the hell do you expect me to track him?
You can talk to Yulfin. Tell him you're willing to help.
I sputtered a laugh. That's your plan? He nodded, giving me a look that seemed to say, there's nothing wrong with my plan. If you truly were close friends with Stephen, he would have told you that his father hates me. Rosalina made a sound of agreement in the back of her throat. She was too busy stuffing popcorn into her mouth and licking her fingers to do much else.
Stephen did tell me what happened. I know Yulfin hates you for the same reason he hates me. He thinks you are pulling Stephen away from his duties. But when you offer to track Stephen, he'll put all that aside.
Rosalina raised her hand as if she were in school. We glanced in her direction. You don't have to raise your hand, I said. What is it? This is something I've been wondering. Yulfin Erickson is loaded. Hasn't he already paid someone to track his son? Jake nodded.
In fact, he has. Several trackers. But they've all failed. Yulfin's people have been all over the city chasing their useless leads. Fiore is good. She must have someone running interference, botching the tracking spells. I don't know.
So what makes you think I'll succeed? I asked, confused. He huffed.
You're a much better tracker than any of those bozos. Besides, you know Steven. You had a close relationship with him. You know that can play a role.
It was true. Once you connected with someone at a certain level, it was easier to find them. That was why I had never tried to track Jake, even though he'd left one lonely t-shirt behind. I found it under the bed when I vacated the apartment. It was the only thing he didn't pack, and it had been an oversight. Clearly, he hadn't wanted me to find him, and I'd at least had enough pride not to go chasing after him, even if I did sob my eyeballs out. I stood and began pacing in front of the love seat, a hand pressed to my forehead. I don't know, Jake. Yulfin will probably kick me out too.
You have to give it a try. I feel that you're Steven's last hope.
Sheesh, Rosalina exclaimed. Don't tell her that. It's already bad enough. Jake's jaw tensed, and he gave my friend one of those intense looks that could make guys twice his size cower under a table. Rosalina pushed to the edge of her chair and met his mean glare with one of her own. She wasn't easily intimidated, even by a werewolf. Jake, I warned, this is her place, and you need to respect that. I almost felt Jake reeling his anger in as if it were a huge, thrashing shark that had smelled blood. He didn't like anyone telling him what to do and what not to do. It was the alpha in him. It had always been a problem. He inhaled sharply and gave Rosalina an apologetic nod. I brought us back to the matter at hand. So we go see Yulfin tomorrow, and—
Tomorrow?
Jake rose to his feet, gaping at me as if I'd lost my mind.
We can't wait. We only have 4 more days to find Steven.
What? Why didn't you mention this before?
I did.
Jake regarded me with a deep frown, looking confused. Oh, he must have said it when I was deaf. I glared at Rosalina. Why didn't she mention this before? She gave me a forced grin and a tiny shrug. I pretended to smooth one of my eyebrows while I hid my face behind my hand. Yes, you did. I don't know. The explosion and everything. It's all moving so fast. I glanced at Jake through a gap between my fingers. He was still frowning, and I could tell he didn't quite buy what I was saying. So, we go now? I said, half statement, half question. He nodded. Where do we go? Yulfin's house?
No. His house is a fortress. We wouldn't get past the front gate. But I know where to find him.
As we prepared to leave, Rosalina held my hands tightly. Be careful. I gave her a reassuring squeeze. I'll do it just this once, then we get back on track. I know. I left with Jake, fighting the conflicting emotions that crowded my chest and reminding myself that this was all about saving a life. And that couldn't be a mistake. Chapter 19. Jake sat in the passenger seat of my Camaro, which he'd pushed back to accommodate his long legs.
I always loved this car,
he said, petting the dashboard as if the car were a dog. I started the engine, frowning. Where to? His comment had sounded as if he was reminiscing about the good old times, and I didn't like it. That past hurt. I wanted to look forward, get this over with, and escort Jake and all this nonsense back out of my life. He sat back and buckled up.
Get on I-44. I'll tell you where to get off.
We drove in silence for several minutes. The air felt thick, and I couldn't stop my hands from twisting over the wheel, making the leather squeak.
That's starting to drive me crazy,
he said as we got close to the botanical gardens exit. Sorry. I popped a piece of gum into my mouth and started chewing, focusing on keeping my hands still. Jake tapped his fingers on his thigh, bouncing his knee nervously. I got fixated on the movement, and it started to drive me crazy. Can you stop? I glanced at his nervous leg.
Oh, sorry.
He stopped and placed his hands flat on his thighs. He stared at them as if it were taking all his concentration to keep them still. "This is awkward," I finally said, feeling stupid. I hadn't felt this inadequate in a very long time, and I didn't like it.
"It is,"
he admitted. I expected him to say more, but he just stared straight ahead.
"Get off here."
I exited the interstate and took a right on South Vanderventer Avenue. As I drove, trying not to think of the huge elephant inside the Camaro, one of Dad's pearls of wisdom came to me from the recesses of my memory.
"Always speak your mind, honey. I can't read your thoughts, and if you let me guess what you're thinking, I'll probably guess wrong. So just tell me, what the hell is on your mind?"
I smiled to myself.
"Something funny?"
Jake asked. I shook my head. Just remembering Dad and something he used to tell me all the time. He grew quiet again. A question buzzed inside my head. Something I had asked the universe 1,000 times after Jake left, except the universe had never answered. And now, the one person who could solve the puzzle was here, and I couldn't bring myself to ask. The worst part was, I was afraid of what he might say, of how his explanation might undo me once more. Even if I'd learned to love myself properly and I thought I understood my worth. But who was I kidding? I had to know. "Why did you leave?" I blurted out.
"I wish I could."
He said at the same time, but stopped abruptly. He let out a sad chuckle that was deep and throaty. "It's not funny." I pressed on the brake and stopped at a red light.
"No, it isn't. It's anything but."
He instructed me to take a ride on Kentucky Avenue and to park the car. We sat quietly for a moment after I shut off the engine. I took a deep breath and let go of all the advice swimming in my head. It seemed like there were 20 people in there trying to tell me what to do. Dad, Mom, Daniela, Lucia, Rosalina, Tom. They'd all told me to forget Jake and not spend more time worrying about him. For better or worse, I stifled their murmurs and decided to just be me. "I think we should talk," I said, without glancing in his direction. "I'd like to talk. To understand." I waited for Jake's answer, watching him out of the corner of my eye. His fingers were digging into his thighs, and the hints of claws flashed for an instant. "That bad, huh?" "Never mind," I said. "Just don't get blood in Dad's car, okay?" Realizing what he was doing, he relaxed his hands.
"I think talking will make things worse."
"Excuse me?" Anger flared inside of me, and words crowded inside my mouth. "Of course you think talking is going to make things worse and prefer disappearing off the face of the earth, and why not? It's a hell of a lot easier." That was what I wanted to say, but anger didn't let me articulate it. Clearly, here lay the proof that all the advice swimming in my head was there for a good reason. People much smarter than me had been kind enough to provide it because they knew the stuff I came up with on my own sucked. "Just forget it," I said. It was just a brief moment of insanity that prompted me to ask. He ran a hand through his hair, and I could feel the frustration leaving his body in waves, like ripples in the water after a rock breaks its surface. His energy felt like a rocket ready to blast off into space, and with no way out, it seemed a distinct possibility he might blow up inside my car. Just when I thought he might go all supernova on me, he let out a pent-up breath. And as if making a decision that had cost him dearly, he angled his body in my direction and looked me in the eye.
"I never meant to hurt you,"
he said in a quiet tone that sent a shiver up my neck. Something about his expression made my stomach shrink to the size of a pea. I could tell from the sadness in his eyes that he really believed that talking would be something we might regret. But how could that be? Dad always said that talking was good, that letting your feelings stew was like building a bomb, that things left to interpretation would get twisted into lies and mistakes. Did his advice not apply in this case? Should I leave good enough alone, like everyone had advised? Yet how could I live without knowing? How could I live believing something that might be a lie? And maybe Jake was mistaken, and once we talked, this hollow in my heart would go away. And I would be able to forgive him and live the rest of my life without shadows that belonged in the past. I sighed. Whether or not you meant to hurt me, you did.
I'm sorry.
His apology sounded sincere. And even though he'd broken my heart in two, I had no reason to doubt he truly felt sorry. I wished he would say more, but he didn't. And that made me wonder if his silence was meant to spare me additional pain. You don't need to know, Tony. You don't need to know. After a long silence, he took a deep breath and glanced out the window.
Ready to face Yulfin?
As ready as I'm ever going to be. Chapter 20. Jake took me to a club on the Grove, a bustling commercial district that extended for about a mile down Manchester Ave. The name of the club was the Chained Wolf, a place I'd seen before. Rosalina and I loved partying at the Grove, but had avoided like mange because, well, werewolves and I just didn't mix. I hadn't even known the club belonged to Yulfin Eriksson, so now I had another reason to avoid it.
Yulfin spends a lot of time here,
Jake said, scowling at the sign. A neon design in purple depicting a howling wolf with a ball and chain attached to one of its hind legs. Music blasted from within, and about 10 people were waiting in line to get in. This wasn't the type of place I would have guessed Yulfin Eriksson would frequent, much less own. A club where yuppies met for Tinder hookups wasn't exactly a proper married man hangout zone. Not that I ever got the impression he loved his wife. Stephen had always complained about the way Yulfin treated her. Apparently, infidelity had become one of his favorite pastimes. I would guess the club gave him ample opportunity to find young women to seduce.
He thinks because he's an alpha, he can do whatever he wants,
Stephen had told me more than once, which made me wonder about the alpha I was currently tangled with. Jake certainly looked like the kind of man who could get away with doing whatever he wanted, including breaking a 19-year-old's heart. He was strong, attractive as hell, and gah, I really needed to chuck these stupid thoughts in the garbage. Finding Stephen should be my whole focus. I would put all my senses into finding him and then get back to solving the love life problems of the rich and famous of St. Louis.
Let's go through the back.
Jake headed toward a side dark alley. Why?
The bouncers have instructions to kick me to the curb on sight.
Lovely. At the back of the building, we waited behind a dumpster. The smell of dead rats wafted in the air. I held my breath while Jake kept an eye on the back entrance. 2 bulbs on either side of the metal door provided the only illumination. I'd just been about to ask how long he planned to wait when the door opened. Jake put an arm out in front of me, pressing my back against the wall and squishing my... Really? Way to cop a field, dude. I held my breath as the sound of steps echoed in the alley. Something heavy crashed inside the dumpster. I spooked and my heart skipped a beat, but I managed to bite my tongue and not make a sound. The steps retreated after a couple of beats. Jake grabbed my hand and pulled me out of our hiding place. We dashed toward the door, which was slowly closing. He caught it just in time. His gaze locked on mine reassuringly. A little grin tipped his mouth as if we were playing some sort of hide-and-seek game. He had no qualms about this in the least. Me, on the other hand, my heart was thumping out of control. After a short moment, he nodded, pulled the door open, and we slipped inside. A long hall stretched in front of us, lined with boxes. I read some of the labels. Patron, Koval, Grey Goose. From the looks of it, they had enough booze to keep the young masses of St. Louis drunk for months on end. I could smell alcohol in the air.
Come on,
Still holding my hand, Jake guided me down the hall. At a fork ahead, he stopped and cautiously glanced in both directions. Then we kept going. The sound of music grew louder as we approached a swinging door with an eye-level window. The bottles inside the boxes rattled with the beat of the music's low bass. Jake peered through the window, then pushed the door open, and we were in.
See?
He said, whispering into my ear so I could hear him over the loud music.
Piece of cake.
It didn't feel like a piece of cake at all. It felt like spicy jalapenos burning my throat and giving me heartburn. Yulfin was a dangerous werewolf. More dangerous than most, anyway. The club was crowded, hopping with young couples out for a good time. A techno beat rattled all my internal organs, and strobe lights primed me for a Category 4 seizure. Most of the patrons appeared to be stales, but my sharp nose told me otherwise. Plenty of supernaturals mingled in the crowd, shifter werewolves most likely. We walked further in, approaching a line of tall tables. People stood around them, chatting and drinking. Beyond the first row, another one followed. Then came a crowded dance floor with fog twirling around the ravers' legs. A DJ and a group of dancers stood at the back on a raised platform, the centerpiece of the entire place. On pedestals above the crowd, both men and women gyrated provocatively, wearing a variety of leather bottoms and tops that left little to the imagination. A blonde wrapped her legs around a pole, defying gravity, and a man mock-whipped a were-cowboy with a crop. Many openly displayed their shifter traits, glowing eyes, furry ears, and claws, and playfully growled and howled as they danced. I tore my eyes from the interesting scene, reminding myself that I hadn't come to check out the merchandise, no matter how hot. To the left of the dance floor, a fully stocked, busy bar glowed with neon strips. The bartenders dressed no different than the dancers on stage. They skillfully juggled liquor bottles and handed out drinks left and right.
This way,
Jake said, leading me forward. Tucked in a corner, round tables and comfortable red leather booths lined the wall. At the far end, Yulfin sat with a group of people, 2 men and 4 women.
You go first,
Jake said.
I'll be right behind you. He'll get pissed faster if he sees me first.
Which meant that, either way, the alpha was going to be pissed. Lucky me. I swallowed thickly and took a deep breath, preparing for Yulfin's intimidating glares. Like Fiore, he had the reputation of being ruthless. Not that I needed to go by hearsay, I'd experienced his tough nature firsthand. He had always scared me. And the fact that Jake followed a step behind me did little to reassure me. This was Yulfin's place, which was packed with his people. But we were here to offer our help. Even if he hated us, he had to listen. Squaring my shoulders, I walked in his direction, radiating a confidence I didn't feel. Fake it till you make it, baby. Yulfin's nose twitched, and his eyes snapped in my direction, pinpointing me with the accuracy of a sniper. His upper lip rose, revealing his upper teeth. I pressed forward, my confidence growing as anger flared in my chest. He pushed one of the women from his lap and shooed everyone away. His guests scurried quickly, scooting sideways out of the circular booth and disappearing into the crowd. I would never understand people who let others treat them that way. I stopped in front of the table, holding his gaze. Hello, Yulfin.
What are you doing here? I thought I made it clear I didn't want to see you again.
Even though I stood above him, he made me feel small with his don't f with me presence and rumbling voice. Still, when I spoke, my own voice came out steady. I'm here to offer my skills to help you find your son, I said. His blue eyes narrowed.
Is that so?
I nodded.
Stephen has been missing for over a week. Why the sudden interest? I thought you only tracked people's mates these days.
At that moment, Jake stepped forward, peeling away from the crowd, and joined my side. Yulfin's blue gaze flashed threateningly, grabbing the edge of the table with white-knuckle strength as if he meant to fling it at Jake.
I convinced her to help,
Jake said. A low growl sounded deep in Yulfin's chest. The table groaned under his grip. My bones turned to jello, and before I realized what I was doing, I reached over and interlaced my fingers with Jake's. For a beat, Yulfin looked like he might blow his top and spew lava like a volcano. It would be Pompeii all over again. Would a virgin sacrifice calm him down? I doubted we could find one in here, though. Time to run. To my surprise, the werewolf got his rage under control and let go of the poor table. He smoothed his dark gray jacket and loosened his tie.
Sit down.
Jake and I exchanged a glance. With an awkward grin, I quickly let go of his hand and slid around one side of the booth. Jake went in through the other, leaving Yulfin in the middle, a fair distance away from both of us.
Thank you for doing that,
Yulfin told Jake between clenched teeth.
The trackers I've hired have had no luck.
He turned to me.
I hear you're good.
I am. I was young, and I couldn't boast about having the years of experience other trackers had, but I had found little Emily Garner when everyone else had failed. That had given me a certain reputation. Yet I had to assume the people Yulfin had hired were halfway decent. He had the money to pay for the best.
What do you need?
Yulfin asked. Every tracker is different. Some needed specific items like a comb with hair, or something the missing person wore around their neck or wrist. And for these trackers, nothing else would do. In my case, I can use anything that belongs to the mark, anything they'd ever laid a claim to, from a toothbrush to a house. Anything that belongs to Stephen will do, I said. Yulfin nodded, reached in his jacket pocket, and pulled something out. He slid it across the table in my direction. It was a silver cufflink in the shape of a crescent moon. I blinked up and scrutinized Yulfin's face. His blue eyes rested on the cufflink, appearing heavy and regretful as if he didn't want to part with it.
We found this in his car the day they took him,
Yulfin said.
It was attached to a torn sleeve. He fought them. There was blood. I've been carrying it with me since that day. Will it do?
I swallowed a lump in my throat. I would have never taken Yulfin for a sentimental man, but at the moment he didn't resemble the person I thought I knew. Right now, he was no more than a concerned father holding on to a bit of hope. Hesitantly, I lifted a hand and picked up the cufflink. It felt wrong to take it, and I almost suggested he should keep it and give me something else. But we had no time for that. It'll do. Yulfin's eyes flicked toward Jake. Then he cracked his neck and sniffed, his face returning to the impenetrable mask he always wore.
How long will it take you to track him?
A few hours at most. He frowned, looking worried or skeptical. I couldn't decide which.
That fast?
He asked. I nodded. When I have an item from my mark, I can find them quickly. If there are no aggravating circumstances, that is.
Aggravating circumstances,
he repeated.
I can assure you, with Bernadetta Fiore at the bottom of this, aggravating circumstances are guaranteed.
Are you sure it's her? I asked without thinking.
Of course it's her.
Yulfin pounded a closed fist on the table. I flinched.
Who else would dare mess with me?
I had no answer for his question, and instead held up the cufflink. I'll get this back to you along with Stephen's location, I hope.
How much?
Yulfin asked. I shook my head. It's not about money. He huffed but didn't press the issue.
If you want, you can do your thing in my house. We could leave now and—
No, thank you, I said emphatically. I have to do this in my own space or it won't work. This was a lie, of course, but since every tracker works differently, he had no choice but to believe me. Very few knew how my skills worked, and I liked to keep it that way. Yulfin pulled out a business card from his breast pocket and flicked it across the table. It slid over the smooth surface, and Jake caught it before it fell to the floor.
Call me as soon as you know. That's my private cell phone number.
Yulfin gestured toward the card. I stood, the cufflink held tightly in my fist. We'll find him.
Don't make promises you can't keep.
He seemed vulnerable as he said this, as if he were afraid of hope. I'll do my best. That I can promise. Chapter 21.
I thought he didn't give it